There's 2, 4. Wait a little while for folks to join us.
Yeah, start getting folks in.
Is there someone timing us? How do we?
I am timing you.
Okay.
So I will just tell you when you have about 3 minutes.
Gladys, Lauren says her video isn't working. I'm not sure. Is Gladys still on?
Okay, they see us talking.
Yeah, so just give a cue, Teresa, before you go, and then we'll record. Or maybe we are recording.
Recording. So welcome attendees. We're waiting just a few minutes for others to join in. We are watching the numbers as folks come in. So give us just a few moments and we will start our session. Welcome back.
All right, text messages.
Is that my text messages?
I believe it is,
How do I
Dr.
turn it off?
Montaño.
Do we know how to turn off that
It
text?
can't. It says it's part of your computer. It's just going to be part of our background music.
Okay.
Until you mute your mic.
Okay, so Stevie and Maria Elena, stop. Just get on. Okay. We'll start just a few minutes as folks continue to log on.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gladys, for some reason, one of our presenters is in the attendees. He says, I'm on waiting, and he's waiting to get in, and that is Guillermo. Is there a way we can move him into the panelists?
Yes. All right, we got it.
Okay, great.
Panelists. Okay. Hola, Guillermo.
I'm gonna wait a few more minutes. I don't want to take time away from our panelists, so we'll just wait about 2 minutes as our attendees continue to log on. Thank you, Guillermo. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Right.
I somehow can't turn on my camera.
Uh-oh. We'll have Gladys allow you to.
I can share my screen though, so that's a good thing.
Going to start in about 1 more minute. We still have attendees logging in. They're still coming in.
And Lauren, your camera's working okay, right?
No, Lauren's camera isn't working either.
Wait, I'm on now, I think.
You're on now? Cool.
Are you?
Yeah,
There
I
you
don't know
go.
if you see me.
Okay.
Okay, starting in 1 minute.
Lupe's on now.
Great.
And Lupe.
Hello.
Starting in 1 minute.
So Teresa, on the upper right corner, apparently you can turn off your notifications to
How do I do that?
mute your text message activity.
How do I do
Or maybe
that?
that's mine. That could be mine.
Close. I don't know. Unless I turn off my, I could turn off my,
That's okay.
no one needs to be calling me right now anyway. Okay, we're going to start. Panelists and attendees continue to roll in, but we will get started. My name is Teresa Montaño, and along with Patricia Lopez, we are the co-moderators for this historic work that we're doing in connecting the issues of teacher preparation to the movement for ethnic studies. As we explained last week in our session, we maintain that implementing a solid curriculum in ethnic studies in any K-12 system will require educators who have knowledge of ethnic studies content, epistemology, and pedagogy. And in doing a quick read of your comments from last week, many of you believe as we do that future ethnic studies teachers must be, one, grounded in ethnic studies with a strong undergraduate program in any of the 4 distinct disciplines in ethnic studies. And as you noted in your notes also, you believe that this should occur not only in their undergraduate program, but also in their teacher education programs. We encourage you to fill out those evaluations when you leave us today. Many of the things that you are writing about will become themes or concepts that we will then begin to engage in a collaborative discussion on during 2 forums. And also thank you for increasing the themes and ideas that we need to cover in our sessions. As we talked about before, a really, really important component of this work is to answer the question, what will it take to develop and design a statewide programmatic response, ensuring that the next generation of ethnic studies teachers are grounded in ethnic studies, both in the content and the discipline? What can we do to construct these pathways that embody the totality of ethnic studies, an undergraduate program, a strong credential option, and a strong collaborative professional development program, which will facilitate the continuous growth and community connections ethnic studies practitioners need once they're in the field? As you listen to our panelists today, we invite you not only to take copious notes and jot down key points, but that you join us later next week in constructing this policy agenda and this advocacy plan. In this light, we know that the quick shift to adopting ethnic studies that many of you are facing in your districts requires that teacher education not just be within the walls of the university, but that it continues post-university. The first set of panelists today will share with you the role of district, university, and community collaborations that provide the professional development for teachers of ethnic studies already in the field. Our first presenter, and I will be introducing our presenters in the order that they present. Our first presenter is Allison Tiananco Cubales, who is a professor of Asian American Studies in the College of Education and Educational Leadership at San Francisco State. Most of you know her for her work in the Pinay Educational Partnership, which provides ethnic studies and Filipino American studies courses in San Francisco schools, her work in social emotional development and ethnic studies, and much, much more. Our second set of presenters are Margarita Berta Avila, who's a professor of education at Sac State. She is also one of the officers of the California Faculty Association. She is active in the community and in the union and is well respected for her work in access, equity, and justice. Dale Allender. Dr. Allender is a professor of teaching credentials also at Sac State. He's a professor of language and literacy. He is a co-editor of Our Stories and Our Voices, the first high school ethnic studies anthology, and he will be sharing his work with us along with Dr. Yi Mark, who is a professor emeritus from Sac State Ethnic Studies Department. He was a community organizer in Oakland, Chinatown, and one of the strikers in founding ethnic studies at UC Berkeley, and is the founder of the Sac State Ethnic Studies 65th Street Corridor Community Collaborative Project. After Margarita, Dale, and Gregory, Dr. Guillermo Gomez, an ethnic studies teacher who has taught for more than 24 years, everything from first grade to graduate level courses. He is currently teaching ethnic studies and training teachers in the San Diego Unified School District, and is the co-chair of the district's Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee. Following Dr. Gomez, we have Armando Vasquez Ramos from Cal State Long Beach. Armando has been a long-term activist in promoting educational opportunities for Chicano Latino history, education, immigration policy. He is the co-director of the U.S.-Mexico Relations Project at Cal State Long Beach, where he coordinates that work. Following Armando, our last set of panelists on this particular session is Lauren Beal, who is a social science teacher committed to inquiry-based education. She works at Edison High School, where she championed the African American Studies course there. And she is also the sponsor of the Black Student Union and the Ujima program. Fernando Santillan is a Chicano Studies teacher at Edison High School. He comes from the Central Valley, from Greenfield and Salinas. He graduated with a double major in history and Chicano Studies from Fresno State. He is in his 5th year of teaching, and he wrote the curriculum for the Chicano Studies course there and teaches the Race and Social Justice course, which counts as an alternative to the history course there. And finally, Amy Sepulveda was a middle school teacher also in Fresno at the Fort Miller Middle School, is the founder of the Chicano Latino Student Association on campus, which facilitates the development of cultural identity and improved academic performance through community support, equitable curriculum, and cultural events. She's also a member of Fresno State's Chicano Alumni Association, where she raises monies for scholarship to benefit students in higher education. We're going to ask you, as you listen to the panelists, you may type your questions in the chat and direct those questions to any of the panelists. They will be addressing your questions. If you have a general question that we think is going to be addressed later on, we will let you know. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but it's pretty likely that some of those questions will be answered at a later time. We invite you now to place your view options on speaker view so that we can concentrate on our presenters. At the end of the last presentation, we will reserve some time for questions and answers. Thank you, and a big thank you to our wonderful panelists, to Gladys and Patricia, and others who make this possible. And now we will turn it over to Allison.
Hi, everybody. Are we all able to see my slides? Can I get a thumbs up, Teresa? Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm actually gonna keep it here. Are you able to see it now? Full screen? Fabulous. Thank you. So I'd like to begin by saying we're in a time of crisis. And that's the name of this presentation that I'm going to do, is Ethnic Studies in the Time of Crisis, and then with some examples, of course. So I want to begin by doing a land acknowledgement. I'm coming from Ohlone land right now. I'm living here. I want to acknowledge, and I put the word knowledge in all bold, that there is knowledge in this land, and also that they're still here. Part of ethnic studies is making sure that we're very clear about the land that we're on. And so I come to you from Ohlone land. Very, very important to acknowledge that. I also went to Ohlone College, Ohlone Community College, and that's where I took my first ethnic studies class. And that completely changed my life. I wasn't the best student in high school. I didn't do so well. I landed at a community college because I could not go anywhere else. I landed in a Chicano studies class, and this professor, his name was Ramon Quesada, he completely changed my life. And in many ways, without ethnic studies, I definitely wouldn't be here today in front of all of you. I wouldn't be a professor. I wouldn't be living the kind of life that I'm living now. And I would probably have a lot more self-hate and all kinds of problems if I didn't have ethnic studies. So I wanted to start there, and I attribute a lot of that to being on Ohlone land and going to Ohlone College. I also want to acknowledge my ancestors. Ramon Quesada, who was my first ethnic studies teacher, he passed away in 2018. And it was pretty traumatic for our community. But I feel like I was very lucky to be able to share my story about him with his family. And then I also lost another ethnic studies person also in 2018. Her name was Liz Mahino. And she wasn't a professor, but she was that person in the administrative office at UC Berkeley that made sure we all graduated. And to me, she is very much the essence of ethnic studies. So lastly, I also want to acknowledge my best friend for life. Her name was Dr. Dawn Buholano Mabalon. We were like ethnic studies warriors in the trenches together. And she also passed away in 2018. You can imagine my 2018 was not the best year of my life. I lost a lot of very, very important people to our field, very important people to me, very important people who set the path for us to do ethnic studies. And so I want to acknowledge them, our ancestors. All of what I'm doing right now, land acknowledgement, ancestors, that's all part of ethnic studies. I think what's really key is that we think about ethnic studies as part of our life versus thinking of it as just this academic field or a class for our students. It is really about a way of life. Yuri Kochiyama writes, and well, she speaks, our ultimate objective in learning about anything is to try to create and develop a more just society. Now, the current time that we're in, I feel like every day I'm experiencing trauma. Like the current crisis, all of us are experiencing this pandemic, particularly for Asian Americans. I'm not sure if we all understand what is happening to that particular community, but there have been 1,800 reported cases of anti-Asian violence since the beginning of the pandemic. And to me, there's something very deep about that particular situation because I feel like we are not addressing it in our schools. I feel like we need to start questioning, are schools addressing this? Are they ignoring it? What is going to happen when we quote unquote go back? And so to me, I'm asking the question, like, what is education need to be about? What is the purpose of education? I ended up having to return to my ethnic studies worldview. Oftentimes we have a lot of lists of things, and you'll see on my slides, there's a lot of words, but particularly it's important to return back to ethnic studies in this time of crisis. This worldview, these were the things that were practiced 50 years ago, even before we were starting to use words like culturally relevant or culturally responsive. Ethnic studies was already doing it 50 years ago. They were practicing love and respect, solidarity and unity, self-determination and critical consciousness, community actualization, and of course, hope. Now, 50 years ago, you all know what ethnic studies is. So this slide is just like an obligatory slide to let you all know that we've been around for some time. I do want to notice here down at the bottom, the ARC goals of ethnic studies is access, retention, and community. And we need to pay honor to the people who fought for ethnic studies, the Black Student Union, Third World Liberation Front, and all the student, staff, faculty, and community members who put their lives on the line for us to even be able to have this conversation in California right now. I want to be very conscious about how I define ethnic studies, because people have been defining ethnic studies all over California in different ways. But for me specifically, I stick closely to the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State, where I come from. And the actual definition that they use is ethnic studies provides safe academic spaces for all to learn the histories, cultures, and intellectual traditions of Native peoples and communities of color in the US in the first person. So we're supposed to speak for ourselves. And also practice theories of resistance and liberation to eliminate racism and other forms of oppression. So I stick to this, and this is very much what I imagine what we're supposed to be doing in our classes. What we have found most recently is a study that was conducted by researchers at Stanford University. It revealed that ethnic studies at 3 San Francisco high schools reap benefits that at-risk 9th graders were actually doing better in school. This was a surprise to some people. For example, attendance improved 21%, grade point averages jumped 1.4%, and credits earned increased by 23. That basically means people of color were graduating more. Large majority, 90% of San Francisco Unified are students of color. And so all of a sudden, ethnic studies became popular after this particular study. When Stanford says ethnic studies works, everybody starts to really believe it all of a sudden. And now all you see a bunch of ethnic studies programs starting to develop. And there were already programs in particular places, but now districts are really supposedly seeing the value in ethnic studies. I want to note that it was our San Francisco State students who really pushed for ethnic studies in San Francisco Unified, and also people particularly doing the great work of developing the pedagogy of ethnic studies. And so I think it's really important to think deeply about, you know, like not just like that we're great getting better test scores or our kids are graduating, but that there's something fundamentally happening in those classrooms that are giving us these types of results. And so more about why ethnic studies. Several studies have been happening, and more studies around ethnic studies, looking at curriculum and pedagogy, basically that it's reflective, relevant, and responsive to students, and then that we're getting results that students have higher self-esteem, self-concept, and self-determination. It's really improving the notion of mental wellness amongst students, civic and community engagement, and commitment to cultural perpetuity. So you can see a bunch of these different resources if you want to learn more about what's happening. I will also say at San Francisco State, a study was done on our campus, and it said that people who majored in ethnic studies and then people who didn't major in ethnic studies who took and passed ethnic studies classes graduated at a higher rate than their peers. Something special is happening with ethnic studies, and people are wondering what it is. We also are starting to see that there's this really important about ethnic studies as developing ethnic studies courses and curriculum, but how can ethnic studies inform all of education? And so I think that's really important, especially when we're starting to develop teachers. Because teachers who come with an ethnic studies background, and I'm citing the work of Edward Kuramang, basically if they come from an ethnic studies background, they actually will be better teachers. And so I think at the bottom line, that's really what's important, what I'm trying to push forth today. So Teresa mentioned that I'm known for some of the work that I do in PEP. I definitely want to acknowledge my colleagues, the two doctors, Dr. Ra Daus Magbual, who's our executive director, and then Dr. Arlene Daus Magbual, who is in charge of our leadership program in PEP. Those are the two directors, and they very much influence the work that I do. And we work together to develop this community of educators, ethnic studies educators. So why Filipinos, right? Like I live in San Francisco and my work is here. My husband's also a teacher here in San Francisco. And early on in his career, over 25 years ago, we realized there was not enough Filipino teachers, even though we have a growing population of Filipinos, which is the the fastest growing Asian American population. We also saw that students in our communities were struggling, like they were struggling with gang violence, they were struggling with, participating in risky behavior, and no one was paying attention to them. And so what we realized is we need to actually do something for our own community. And so we started this thing called Pinay and Pinay Educational Partnerships, PEP. And basically it was a program to serve the youth. But what we realized was to serve the youth, you needed to develop teachers who were actually going to be able to not just look like the students, but actually learn deeply with the students, to be critical educators. And this is very much like the kind of culture that's created in this thing called PEP. I'm very proud to be PEP. PEP has become my family and has actually been all kinds of, they've raised my own child, and they've been definitely holding me through my entire career. And so I really feel deeply about the kinds of things that we can do in community with each other. So we have over the years, we've had many, many, many volunteer teachers. And what's amazing is the kind of work that then they've been able to do.
Allison, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, see you. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to just transition really quick because I want to be mindful of our time, but I also want to just throw out a few more ideas around ethnic studies. Like, I feel like PEP is also a space where ethnic studies becomes about youth wellness. So my colleagues and I in Community Responsive Education, which is the other organization that I belong to, have been developing ideas around how can ethnic studies be about youth wellness. And right now in this pandemic, we need youth wellness. And so we've been working with ethnic studies scholars, we've been working with indigenous healers, we've been working with youth and their families, and we have come up with a specific definition that we want you to consider when you're thinking about education and when you're thinking about ethnic studies. Of course, centralizing context, equity approach, and all of these things that you see here is community responsive pedagogy. But I really want to emphasize that community responsive ethnic studies needs to prioritize youth wellness. We have not been in conversation about this enough. We do it in PEP. We talk about in PEP that there's this idea that teacher is also healer, right? And we want to really encourage our programs and our thinking around what that means for teachers, all teachers in ethnic studies and all teachers in general. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of ideas around what is wellness and how can education actually be about this. So, and you'll notice that this definition of wellness is specifically rooted in ethnic studies. So wellness is the harmonizing of mind, body, emotion, and spirit. It is cultivated and sustained through healthy relationships that are responsive to the lived experiences and the historical and material conditions that shape them. Community responsive wellness strengthens the sacred link between self-actualization and community actualization. So this particular definition of wellness is for both the students and the teachers. So the following 3 domains is where we're hoping that ethnic studies will start to think about focusing on. We think it's important in terms of wellness, the wellness of youth and teachers, to think about inner self, a strong sense of community, a strong sense of culture, identity, and agency. Interpersonal is our second domain, a rootedness and commitment to showing empathy toward family, community, peers. And of course, our third domain is interconnectedness, positive interrelatedness to ancestors, place, land, and the natural world. This grows ecosystems where people and communities experience place, power, purpose, awareness, resilience, empathy, hope, love, and joy. And so I'll leave you with this slide. The most important thing that I want to say about all of this is that we believe that ethnic studies needs to be about wellness, and it needs to be about this. And so during the Q&A, if you want to ask me questions of the other work that I'm working on, it's really all related to this work. I'm really developing some new ideas around how to move from culturally relevant to culturally responsive to what I'm now describing as culturally rooted. Oftentimes we are trying to prepare white teachers to teach our children. We also need to think deeply about really recruiting and creating teachers out of our own communities to teach our young people. And so that's what I mean by cultural rootedness. And I can talk deeply about that during our Q&A if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, Margarita, Greg, and Dale.
right, Dale's going to put on our PowerPoint. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. It's a great honor for us to be here and to have been invited. I'm Margarita Berta Avila. I shared faculty at Sacramento State University with CFA and have been co-chair of Ethnic Studies Now Sacramento for several years now with Dale Allender, and definitely Greg Mark has been doing a lot of work with us as well. So our title for today is Who Will Teach the Classes? Building off of what Allison was talking about just a few minutes ago, and nurturing the ethnic studies ecosystem in Northern California. Click. That's our signal. I'm gonna say click. Anyway, so what we wanted to do today was, my part is to offer the historical, just grounding our origin story real quickly to the work that has happened between in the community, teacher preparation at Sacramento State, and ethnic studies department at Sacramento State as well. And we are grounded in these two quotes right here that come from the point 5 of the BPP 10-point platform. And it's really looking at, as it states, about what we want in education, a decent education for our people that exposes the true nature of the second American society. And it's also about believing in an educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of the South. Click. And part of that knowledge of the South is, and the history and how we're grounded and how our work is interrelated in Sacramento really starts with the Third World Liberation front. And so we wanted to show this clip right now of Greg Mark speaking about that connection and correlation.
Yellow Identity Symposium. So it was the first Asian American conference in the country. There had been, China studies, Chinese studies, Japanese and so on, but not total Asian American, and with this kind of coalition mentality. And so at that conference, in which 800 people attended at UC Berkeley Poly Ballroom, we basically packed the place. During the break, my friend Maurice, who was the Black Student Union kind of representative to the media and to other groups, said to me, I don't know why I remember the exact words.
Dale, did something happen?
Yeah, I can't get out of the chat to get back to my screen.
Okay, let's go ahead and
Keep going, yeah.
keep going. If you can just put the slides on presenter mode as well, please. Okay, so one of the powerful moments of the clip that we wanted to show you was the movement that started with Greg's participation and how it came full circle with Ethnic Studies Now Sacramento and that lineage. So we wanted to share that information because we look at our lineage grounded within the Third World Liberation Front and with Greg's work. And that's really important to how we manage and facilitate our work as we're moving forward. Click. Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to state, and this was real evident as well in last week's presentations, is that from organization, resolution, development of and implementation of ethnic studies requirements at Sacramento, every step has been a political act and a political battle, because there has been concerted efforts to alienate or separate teacher education from ethnic studies, or ethnic studies from teacher education. And so at all points of our work, which you'll see evident in when Dale and Greg begin to speak, we have been very intentional, at least from our end as Dale and myself, to be clear that I come from a Chicana studies background, but I'm in teacher education. And those that are my colleagues and comrades that are in ethnic studies, they're in the discipline of ethnic studies. So for teacher education to say we can do ethnic studies or to work in the communities without the collaboration of our comrades in ethnic studies would be absolutely inappropriate to do. And so it's been a real important task for us to make this link and this integration visible at all points of our work. Click. So ethnic studies, now Sacramento, grounded on our lineage of the Third World Liberation Front, is a collaboration of community members, students, teacher educators, and ethnic studies professors. And this is really important because in the beginning, we were thinking that the work was going to last, to just even obtain a resolution was going to last maybe 2 years or so when we started this work. And what we quickly came to realize when the students began to center themselves in our gatherings is that this was going to happen way faster. And at that moment, our roles flipped, in which we really made it evident to the students, ethnic studies professors, teacher educators, and community members, that we were at their beck and call. And so what they needed and how they wanted to move forward was how we were going to move forward. And that statement that we made became the epithet, became really the framing, the tool that led us to the trajectory of the various work that we are engaged in. Click. So with that, keeping that in mind, Ethnic Studies Sacramento was doing local statewide advocacy, and that was mostly the area that I was in, but it very much influenced what was happening with respect to the professional development that was beginning. And that local statewide advocacy led to the Sacramento City Unified School District resolution, and it also led to our involvement with respect to AB 101, 2772, and 2016. At the same time, I'm going to speak to this more in just a minute, it led to what we began to call our consortium, in which that consortium, which was the syndicated work, combination work of teacher educators and faculty from ethnic studies at Sacramento State, led to the Sacramento City Unified School District Professional Development, an MA in Critical Multicultural Education with Ethnic Studies Certificate, and currently now our Comprometidos grant that includes 4 components, being ethnic, one of them being ethnic studies professional development. Click. What's also very important about what I just mentioned with respect to our work as Ethnic Studies Now Sacramento was that in the resolution, when it passed in Sacramento City Unified, we were concretized as a consortium. So if you see towards the latter part of the resolve, it states that certification options provided to them by, or comprehensive training, professional development, and certification options provided to them by the Sacramento State Ethnic Studies Teacher Training Credential Consortium. So we concretized our work. Click. And we always have to give acknowledgement and credence in where these ideas came from. And this consortium was grounded, and we know that Teresa, who's one of the leaders of this webinar, from years ago, and I don't even know if she remembers, began to plant this seed about needing to have a consortium between ethnic studies and credentialing programs. And so we ran with it. And that vision became enacted at Sacramento State. And it really became, as I've mentioned earlier, the forefront of what we've been doing up to now. Okay, Dale, you're on.
Okay, so I apologize for the technical challenges. It wasn't technology, it was me. I want to come back to that video because it's really important to hear Greg give us our origin story.
I spearheaded a conference called the Asian Experience in America, Yellow Identity Symposium. So it was the first Asian American conference in the country. There had been, China studies, Chinese studies, Japanese and so on, but not total Asian American, and with this kind of coalition mentality. And so at that conference, in which 800 people attended at UC Berkeley Poly Ballroom, we basically packed the place. During the break, my friend Maurice, who was the Black Student Union kind of representative to the media and to other groups, said to me, I don't know why I remember the exact words. He said, "We met last night. We're going out. Are you with us?" And what that meant was we, the Black Student Union, we met last night, which was a Friday night. We're going out on strike. Are you with us? Meaning, are the Asian American students with the Black students? And I said, yes, but of course I can't speak for everybody. And about a week and a half later was the Third World Liberation Front strike. And that's one of the reasons why in the textbook that Professor Allender and I co-edited, one of the signs here is Third World Liberation Front, because there's a story to the cover. And originally we fought for a third world college, and only San Francisco State has a college of ethnic studies. And our history, our way, I taught at the University of Hawaii Ethnic Studies, and that's the slogan of the University of Hawaii's Ethnic Studies Department. And part of the prompt to help get things moving in more recent times is an organization called Ethnic Studies Now, and in particular the Ethnic Studies Now Sacramento chapter.
All right, so thank you for your patience with my glitches. One of the things that was fascinating for us when we established Ethnic Studies Now and moved forward into the resolution and into our professional development was this notion that we first began with Sleater's understanding that in ethnic studies teachers, one, you have to have a good relationship with your students. You have to believe in your students. You have to be grounded in ethnic studies content. And we established our PD with these understandings. When we established that, the resolution was passed. The district said, and this is Sacramento City Unified District, said, well, we don't have a course of study. How are we going to move forward with that? We didn't initially see that as a roadblock as part of the battle. We saw it as, okay, well, they don't have it, so let's do that. So we wrote the course of study in short order. And in there, we listed resources, some free, some online, some that they would have to purchase. And the district turned to us and said, well, you don't have a textbook. We can't have an ethnic studies class, and we can't move it through without a textbook, in spite of what the resolution said. So we said, we're going to go create a textbook. And we did. We created it. And we weren't happy with it. And so our point in creating it, though, was to say that this is supposed to still be grounded in the community. So at each step of the way, we battled. And we said, all right, well, if we're going to create a textbook right now for expedience sake, we want to create several versions of that. And each time we create a new version, we want to go back to the students who were using that book and get their feedback on what would be reflective of them, of their motivation, of their engagement. So we have the textbook, we have the session started, and initially our PD was around my dining room table, quite literally. We had a handful of folks come from the district, and we brought in community members. our goal was initially twofold. We wanted the teachers to have cultural immersions and a sense of criticality. So we didn't just create sense of heroes and holidays, right? We wanted to get critical members of the community reflective of their ethnic backgrounds who were trying to move transformative spaces. But we also didn't just sit around that table. And I'm going to invite Greg to comment for a moment, because he created some of the most amazing cultural immersive experiences that combined both a deep sense of ethnic traditions, ethnic histories, but also criticality. So Greg, if you could speak for a moment about your experiences with the teachers in Angel Island.
Colleagues, you have about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Angel Island, in the context of Asian American studies, is a very important beginning point. And for me personally, it was. And I wanted to relay that to the teachers so that they had a deeper understanding and the passion. And for example, my name is listed as Gregory Yi Mark. Mark is Mock. It's my paper name. My real last name is Yi. So my dad was called a paper son. And so in other words, he was an illegal, undocumented worker. And he had to live his adult life with that cast over him. And so Angel Island is where my father, as well as over 100,000 Chinese immigrants went to. And part of the draw there is the old barracks in which there's poems inscribed on the walls. And so we went through it with the teachers. And I think then, rather than just looking at a documentary or reading about it, they were able to get the passion and get it from the heart. Okay.
Thank you. So the Sacramento City Unified School District did an internal study. They surveyed about 300 students, and overwhelmingly the students who were in classes with teachers who were taking our professional development said that they felt a sense of, they learned about themselves, they learned about their classmates, they learned about their classmates' families and their community, and that they wanted to know more, and that they felt a sense of agency, and they felt a sense that they mattered. Soon after that, we received a grant to expand our professional development beyond that school district and with greater numbers. We went from a handful of teachers in Sac City to 50, then 200, and now another group of 200. It also moved us into more interactive and arts-oriented critical work. This is one of the last PDs that we had. We also brought the teachers together to work on curriculum development based on the work of some of the lead teachers who we worked with most initially. We brought students in who had some of those courses, and similar to Sac City, we have more qualitative expressions from students, one-on-one interviews, where they talked about that same sense of belonging, but they talked about that sense of belonging in a contrastive way. They were clear that they were not experiencing this in their other courses. After our initial open survey ethnic studies experiences, we wanted to get deeper into community transformation, and so we began to have sessions on PAR. And I don't know if Margarita, you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yes, just real quickly.
2 minutes.
Okay. Just real quickly, we know that ethnic studies is grounded in challenging institutional inequities and also creating transformation. In that transformation is the process of healing. And so my colleagues, Melissa Rivera, Jennifer Ayala, and myself presented on PAR Entre Mundos, and in order to take that level of the initial foundational work that Dale and Greg were doing with them during their PD to a level of how it can be enacted through participatory action research.
From that one-on-one PD with classes, with districts, and with the region, there was a call from those teachers to expand our work even further. Greg?
So what you have there is an image of a meeting that was February 22nd of this year. And I represent an organization part of ethnic studies, and it's called the 65th Street Corridor Community Collaboration Project. And we started this in 2001. We have service over, let's see, what was it? Over 31,000 residents along the corridor, and 1,400 Sac State students have worked in the project. And here we're discussing a new project. And on the right photograph, on the left is Tuong Dong, who is, his family are refugees from Vietnam. And he's the principal at Wilseywood Middle School. Next to him is a woman named Deborah Ledbetter. And next to her is another person who is a teacher. And she will be teaching an 8th grade ethnic studies course. So this is something that we worked on together in terms of expanding the 65th Street Corridor project. Is an 8th grade ethnic studies course. We also worked at Hiram Johnson High School. You don't see it, but the principal of Hiram Johnson is sitting at this table. There are 13 people.
Colleagues, could you wrap it up? Your time is up.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries, we're actually into our last slide. We just want to note that the grant that we received to expand our work was not given to us. It was something that we fought for and that we continue to fight for at every step of the way. We are developing a range of different online resources similar to the short film that you saw in the beginning to help not only expand our work here, but to make that stuff available to ethnic studies educators and students throughout the state. This is a labor of love, but it's also a critical act, and we appreciate the opportunity to share some of that with you right now.
Thank
Can I
you.
just have 30 seconds, please?
Can I come back to you at the very end during the Q&A, because we have other people and our time is tight. I'm so sorry. And you do have questions in the Q&A if you will type those in. And Guillermo, you are on.
Okay, saludos, greetings de Kumeyaay land, known as today as the colonized name of San Diego. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm gonna put my timer, Teresa, because I know you're gonna yell at me if I don't stay to the 15 minutes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so before I start, I know that my name is Guillermo Gomez and San Diego Unified School District. I just want everyone to know that that's just my place of employment. I'm actually accountable and responsible to the following organizations. First is Unión del Barrio, who has developed my political ideology in order to continue the work that we do. Second is ARE, the Association of Raza Educators, and I'm gonna just give a little brief history of the campaign here in San Diego. So we saw the example of que está pasando en Tucson and LA and in the Rancho, San Francisco. So we decided to follow kind of the same blueprint of ethnic studies now. So we needed an organization, a mass-based organization of educators to begin this campaign, right? And in San Diego, no one messes with ARE when it comes to education. ARE is a very reputable and respected organization of teachers. So we began the campaign about 6 years to get this ethnic studies program for San Diego Unified. So once we had those initial meetings and we had all these interested educators to join us and people that wanted to put the work in, we decided to formally name ourselves Ethnic Studies Now San Diego, right? And that's how we began the ball, and then we got the resolution for San Diego Unified. And to me, the resolution is kind of like the easy part, right? The resolution is the easy part. I think what came next was the most time-consuming and commitment of work, which was making sure that the district adhered to the principles of ethnic studies, the implementation of ethnic studies program had some integrity. So in order to make the district accountable, we formed an advisory committee of some of those people that still wanted to continue the work of ethnic studies in San Diego, and we named ourselves the Ethnic Studies Advisory Committee. We are co-chaired with Trish, and I think Trish might be on this webinar as well. So the ethnic studies advisory committee has 3 committees within the organization. One is curriculum writing, one is teacher training, and one is research, because we know that we need to partner with also higher education institutions to prove that, ethnic studies work. I'm also a part of Safe California Ethnic Studies as part of being lucky to be one of the collaborators of the model curriculum. And also now I'm glad to also be part of the Liberty Ethnic Studies model curriculum. So the reason I say this because this is not a hand solo kind of work, right? This is in the tradition of ethnic studies with third world liberation. It's important to know that we cannot let these programs just to be in the hands of the district, that there has to still be, the las riendas have to be led by the community, right? And by the educators and by the parents and by the students. So just like many people are familiar with this poem, right? En la cache, this, whenever I do any presentation or whenever I start any class, we always start with this poem because it's very important that we rehumanize ourselves. Here's a picture of Chicano Park. We just turned 50 years this year, and unfortunately we couldn't celebrate. So Chicano Park is also a big part of ethnic study history here in San Diego. So it's important to ground ourselves in this concept of love, right? Of revolutionary love. I have 2 pictures. I have 4 daughters. I have 2 daughters here in this picture. And because it's important to me that, that whoever teachers are my daughters confront, or whatever teachers they're part of, whatever classroom they're part of, that these teachers have some sort of ethnic studies and some guiding principles, right? Because, although they're going to be okay, they're middle class, their parents are educated and whatever, if we don't take care of the rest of society, it's going to affect my daughters. And then someone sent me this quote the other day, that all of this year's education has not taught us about to love ourselves, right? And I don't even know who wrote this quote. And then, so it's important to know that ethnic studies, again, is rehumanizing ourselves. So I'm gonna go through real quick on how we collaborate with teachers in San Diego Unified. So it's all grounded in our introductory ethnic studies course in Lincoln High School. In Lincoln High School, it's, it's the typical urban school with the typical urban problems. So it was very ideal to start this ethnic studies class at Lincoln High School. So many teachers, when they wanna know more about ethnic studies, they just want curriculum, right? And then, but we felt that the teachers had to go through the same process that students go through and the introductory to ethnic studies in order to build a foundation of ethnic studies. So we began with the typical question, and I know that Allison referred to this, right? Any ethnic studies program has to be founded in this principle, which is social justice, right? And social justice is such a interest convergence, right? Who can argue against social justice, right? So we began with this concept of social justice, and how our courses had to be grounded in social justice. So we started looking at our examination of our past, present, and how we can, based on that and our funds of knowledge, how we can make a better world for ourselves. And also we collaborated with some teachers in Oaxaca through ARE and Unión del Barrio, and we learned that the Anahuacs, okay, from what is known as the Americas today, had the earliest form of what we call today public education. The schools were designed for the youth to evolve, okay, as conscious human beings and to better themselves, their community, and the world. So we began looking at how ethnic studies program should look like and what kind of professional development should look like for teachers. So here are our course goals and objectives, and I'm not going to read them all, so I'll just give you a second to read them. As you can see, they are grounded in the guiding principles of ethnic studies. And then, so we began teachers to go through this process of self-examining themselves, right? To change this whole paradigm how they taught. So our first unit is probably the most important foundational unit, which is building community. I often get a lot of student teachers, and they come with all this knowledge on how to develop courses and how to do that 5-step lesson plan without having this knowledge of how to build community. And the first thing I do for the first month, they tell me, hey, throw those lesson plans away and let's build community in your classroom. Because once you have a strong, positive, and loving community in your classroom, you pretty much can teach anything. So our first unit is based on building a community with the students. And that's the process that we do with the professional development with teachers. Our second unit is based on the Black Food Nation and also Maslow Pyramid of Needs. in order to students to be able to understand why human beings react a certain way. When we meet all the stresses in our lives, how do we react and why we react a certain way? So be able for them to identify those trigger points. Then we move into the elements of our identity, right? And the intersectionality, they bring their funds of knowledge, they're able to celebrate the different parts of the identity. And that means family, and means friends, it means teachers, it means, everything that evolves around their lives. And then once they're grounded and they're very strong about what their identity is, then we start bringing the teachers and students into the ideas and attacks against their identity. And once they're able to analyze and identify the systems of oppression, the question comes, well, what can we do now? And our next unit is Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and what people have done in the past in order to reclaim their humanity, in order to fight for a better society. And so we give them examples of social movements and historical figures of people, people of color specifically, that have not been included in our textbooks. And at the end is, we give them a space in which, even hypothetically, where they can create change, even at the small scale or big scale. So our first unit, we train teachers to be able to build community. We do all these different activities that you can see there, but we know that having a strong sense of community, like I mentioned earlier, must be established in order to delve into this, issues of class, gender, race, sexual orientation, sexism, or whatever. And then we also have this practice called narrative medicine, in which students every day, every week on Monday, we meet as a circle, right? And we stay away from this concept of restorative practices, because we feel restorative practices, teachers use this when a problem arises, right? So we wanna establish a culture in which students are able to talk about issues, right? And not only issues, but then we start moving that a little bit higher into whatever topics we're learning in the course. So students really enjoy this time to be able to just share ideas, share stories. And then we do the same process with teachers as well. And then here are just a few examples of some of the activities that we do in the community unit. On the left, you can see that they construct a family tree. They have to go and interview 10 family members, right? And then we define family members as being, they can be a friend, it can be a neighbor, it can be anyone that you consider family. And they have to actually interview these family members and present a family tree. Then we do things like, typically in culture responsive classroom, which is I am poems, in order for them to be able to celebrate their identities. And then we move to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like I mentioned earlier, and for students to be able to define themselves and be able to tackle problems when they arise in their lives and in the lives of their families and friends. But also, we know about the concept and how Maslow used this pyramid from the Blackfoot Nation, and how the Blackfoot Nation, they do not have a pyramid, right? They have a tipi, because they believe that the tipi reaches the sky, right? That you continue, the self-actualization does not have a roof, that it keeps going. And it's funny, and then we also, once they know how Maslow's work, then we flip it around so they can see that actually in the Blackfoot Nation believe everybody was self-actualized in the beginning, right? So now that all the members of this nation are self-actualized, their job was how to improve their community, how to improve themselves and their families. And this is just one of the quotes when the students have to reflect about Maslow's, and how now the students become kind of themselves. They take ownership of their, of their actions, their thoughts, their beliefs. And then the last unit, the next unit is the identity intersectionality. So students are able to explore, to be able to reflect about the different aspects of their identities. And here's just some examples that students do when they explain the different traits of their identities. And we also do the same thing with the teachers.
Guillermo, you have 1 minute.
Oh, seriously? Okay, so it was really quick. Anyway, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is kind of like the tools the students use and able for them to change the things around them, right? And start seeing that the history repeats itself. They start seeing the things that they're reading about in regular social studies classes are happening today, right? So what can they do about it? And they know that they become human rights agents themselves. And I'll move along, and here's just some examples. So it's very important that the students understand that there's that all this learning has to be put into practice. Some of the things that we have done at Lincoln High School is that there was a rifle range. The students were able to end rifle ranges for the whole district of San Diego Unified. So I'm gonna move really quick to the next thing. Okay, so we all often talk about how, ethnic studies saves the lives of students, which is absolutely true and is fundamental, but we often do not talk how ethnic studies can also save the lives of our teachers as well. And we know that if we continue doing this professional development the same way the districts do it, ethnic studies is not going to work, right? So kind of like on this quote, the master, house will never be dismantled using the master's tools, right? We cannot build a new house, a liberated house, if we use the same tools. And often districts fall into this trap, right? They bring organizations like Facing History, right? And they think that's ethnic studies, and nothing to put down Facing History or Teaching Tolerance, because there's great resources, but it's not ethnic studies. So I also teach a course at San Diego State about how to implement ethnic studies into our curriculum. And I feel like if we're gonna build a new house, that every teacher has to go through the training of foundational theory, right? So they're exposed to all these different theories, there's different authors. Some of our colleagues are on this call right here. And so they're able to develop the theoretical framework. And then as they're building the new house, right, then they're exposed, and then we play around with the different frameworks that we have used in order to develop our courses here in San Diego, and also for the model curriculum. We use Tolteca's work. We use the guidelines and principles of the model curriculum. We also use San Francisco Unified Ethnic Studies Framework. And we also train Teaching Tolerance social justice standards. And then, so now they have built the framework for their house. Their curriculum is going to look different, right? It's going to be responsive to the community. Okay, I'm almost done.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so your house might start small, right? But then it's going to get bigger. It's going to be responsive to your community. It's going to look different with whatever you teach. So curriculum is going to be however you make it, right? But as long as they're, they implement those guidelines and those fundamental theories, right? Your house is, and sometimes they're going to fall on their face, right? Sometimes we know the ethnic study is something that you just start and end, and it continues, that we're growing, we're not experts, that we're also students of ethnic studies. So they might, not work out the first year, but eventually they're going to build a strong curriculum for their students. And here's some of the quotes that I have for some of my, I'm right on time, give me one more minute. Some of the master teachers who took the course this year, so they understand the curriculum can look a different way, right? There's not just a way to do it. We cannot just hand them a curriculum and teach that, because that's going to fail. So I'll let you read some of those quotes. So students and teachers understand that ethnic studies is a practice, right? The ethnic studies grows. They have to look at themselves in order to empower themselves, in order to improve themselves as educators. So they know that any professional development has to be grounded into this, that it's a philosophy, that it's not just a class, that it's just not a curriculum.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will, and there's a question for you in the Q&A. I hate to do these because these are excellent presentations, but we do want to reserve some time for everybody and your questions. So our next presenter is Armando Vázquez Ramos.
Sí, buenas tardes, ¿me oyen? Great. Muy buenas tardes. I'm Professor Armando Vázquez Ramos from Cal State Long Beach Chicano Latino Studies Department. And I'm also the president and the founder of the California-Mexico Studies Center. Much of my work in developing the Ethnic Studies program in Long Beach has been through my nonprofit as the advocacy, the organizing for behind the program. And I'm going to begin with sharing my my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint. I think that you should be able to see now, right? Okay, I'm having some problems here. Share. Okay. Can you see it now? Great.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go through this briefly as we develop this program, which it's a model that is turnkey ready for you and anyone to begin through a collaboration between a school district with a local community college, CSU, or UC. The program started and is today a dual enrollment Saturday Academy for high school students in the 10th through 12th grade. We offer now 15 Cal State Long Beach Ethnic Studies classes during this time frame on Saturdays. And this is in collaboration with 3 local school districts, the largest one being the Long Beach Unified. The large one being the Long Beach Unified, but we actually started the program through the El Rancho Unified School District. This was a partnership that I established with the district at the time that they passed their resolution back in 2014. The following fall, we organized a campaign to promote ethnic studies summit at Cal State Long Beach. And out of that came the idea of having, instead of during the school week or for in the summer, to have on Saturdays these classes. So we started in the fall of in the spring of 2015, the first Chicano Studies class from Cal State Long Beach, which I taught, and that it was both accredited by Cal State Long Beach and the high school. And that's the model that we are promoting here, that is immediately possible for students to gain the credit from both the university as well as the 10 credits for high school. The program now offers 10 classes at 6 Long Beach high schools, 3 classes at 3 different high schools in the Norwalk La Mirada school district. And we continue to offer now 2 classes at El Rancho High School, where all of these are classes that are contracted and paid for by the districts. And that's what acquires or provides the students the academic credit, the college level instruction, and also it creates a pathway for those institutions that are connected to the program to offer the students the possibility to enter Cal State Long Beach. Next, of course, I want to emphasize that this is the concept of a dual credit that gives a sense of greater accomplishment to the students, but also that they get a sense of confidence that they can do college work. And of course, these classes are all taught by Cal State Ethnic Studies Department's faculty. We do this on a rotation basis, and each department teaches about 4 classes every semester. So what we've created is 15, sometimes 16 new faculty positions. These are all part-time faculty that are hired to teach these classes on the Saturday sessions. The program offers a replicable model that can be established, as I mentioned before, between any school district that commits the budget, that has the means to create a partnership with their local community college or a UC or a CSU that offers accredited ethnic studies courses. This is, of course, the greatest impact that we have had now over the last 5 years. This week, we are completing the 5th year of the program. And of course, it has been a very challenging semester because of the crisis that we will continue to face. But by the end of this 5th year, the program will have offered already more than 3,000 students with at least 1 ethnic studies college level accredited course before they graduate. And there has been, in some instances, students that have acquire as much as 4 classes of credit during their high school years. So the way the program is structured, so that after they take the initial cornerstone class, which is called the U.S. Experience, U.S. Diversity and the Ethnic Experience, is when they begin to take second level classes that are specific to one of the 4 ethnic studies departments. What happens with specifically the Long Beach Unified is that is documented as a very successful impact upon the students. We're in the process of completing a 5-year report. This can be made available to you, as well as the curriculum, the syllabus that was developed for the general course, the cornerstone course that is called Ethics Studies 215, U.S. Diversity in the Ethnic Experience. And this is a curriculum, a syllabus that we developed that reflects the history, the culture, and the contributions of these 4 ethnic groups to U.S. society. So at the end of the program, after now 4 years, going into 5 years at the end of the semester, we have documented the improvement in grade point averages, the high motivation of students, and of course, the enhanced graduation rates that we have noticed. I'm going to move quickly because I know Teresa is going to be on me in a second. But this is a model, a concept that was built upon the Long Beach College Promise that was established over 10 years ago, which is a partnership by the City of Long Beach, the school districts, Long Beach City College, as well as the university. This is a relationship that was already there when I built the program around that. And this was done again with the collaboration of the university, the College of Extension, what we call here the College of Professional and International Education, and the College of Liberal Arts, which is where the Ethnic Studies departments are housed. The documentary that we produced for the Long Beach program features how the program came about, also how their students through testimony have benefited from the program, and it gives you an idea of how the program is structured. It's linked to this PowerPoint. I'm not going to have time to show you this, but I wanted to make sure that if this is, you go to our website, you can find it. There's several documentaries that we've done on all these ethnic studies programs, and also the importance of how this program has evolved, because it came out of this organizing effort that we accomplished here at Cal State Long Beach back in 2014, after we established a partnership with the El Rancho Unified, who was the first district to pass their own resolution and requirement for the ethnic studies, for their graduates to have at least one ethnic studies course. This is where we are now offering them not only the weekend classes, but they have developed more than 15 classes of their own. And truly, it has been a difficult challenge in many, many ways, because there has always been resistance. There will always be resistance by school districts, budgetary questions, scheduling questions, and of course, the content of the curriculum. But that's why we avoided all of the above by having these classes scheduled on the Saturday sessions that allows for the students to attend with clear minds. They're not taxing their activities, whether it's athletics or any other after-school activities, as well as the focus on their Monday through Friday schedule of classes. So this idea and this model offers this pathway that we have just created the model for you to consider adapting and proposing first to your school district. The cost for each one of these classes is approximately $10,000 to $12,000. That covers the instructor, the faculty that teaches the class, but also it allows for the administrative part, which provides the transcript at the end of the semester, at the end of when they graduate.
Wanda, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. For them to carry this additional credits, which along with advanced placement classes, sometimes can be more than a semester of college coursework by the time they finish. And then finally, I mentioned already how from that resolution and the work that we did through this campaign to promote ethnic studies came that push for the resolutions by the school districts. But somebody already said it. It's not enough just to have resolutions. The challenge really is to create the synergy and in this case, acquire the credit from the colleges. There's another video that I wanted to mention that you can see, and this is how the El Rancho Unified evolved into the program that they have now. And I'm not going to show it again in the interest of time. So I will conclude with that. Please share the PowerPoint with anybody who would like to contact us. And we'll be glad to answer any questions when we are done. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to staying in touch with this wonderful network.
Great. And Armando, you have one question in the Q&A.
Wonderful.
We will go on to our final presentation in this webinar, and that will be Lauren, Fernando, and Amy. You are on.
Hello, everybody. First of all, we'd like to start this off by saying that this presentation is dedicated to the memory of Jakari Fisher, a former student of mine, and who we lost to gun violence a couple of weeks ago. And so this will be a memorial to him.
Thank you, Fernando, for that beautiful tribute. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Sepulveda. I am a 7th and 8th grade history teacher at Fort Miller Middle School, and I also founded and I run the Chicano Latino Student Association on campus. If you're interested in getting to know more about my students and the work that we do, the awesome work within the community, feel free to follow us on Instagram. Or if you have any questions about this presentation, feel free to email me, and my email is there as well. All right, so let's get started with what Fort Miller looks like. So if you see on the screen, I provided 2017 data because it's still very similar to what we look now, and that's when I first started working there. We have a very high suspension rate, very high chronic absenteeism, and academic performance, as you can see. But as we look below at the demographics, it's quite confusing because with over 90% of our students being students of color, what we see is power, what we see is potential. And there's a contradiction that's happening there. So my question, of course, is what are we doing here? What are the interventions that we're putting in place to help our students of color be successful? And when I walked onto campus in 2017, I went ahead and I just asked, what are we doing for our students? And I was told that there's a district-funded BSU program there, that it was inactive, but otherwise there was no other services for our students. So now, as an educator at my first job at Fort Miller, I started to reflect on my own educational experience, and I noticed that with the 12 years that I've been out of middle school myself, the same problems still exist. There's still a lack of representation in our curriculum, which leads to, not feeling connected to campus, which leads to not feeling like you belong. And it all stems from this systemic racism that goes all the way from national policies to state policies, all the way into our classroom. And I started to think, about my own self and who would I be if I was taught to love myself a little bit more, if I was taught the power of my history instead of being taught to be invisible. And as educators now, I believe it's our job to break that pattern and to teach students to weaponize their history as tools of empowerment. As such, CLASA was born, which is the Chicano Latino Student Association, and it's quite simple. This is a campus club, so because there was no foundational groundwork to actually have a Chicano Latino studies class at the middle school level, we had to create an outside entity or a club to get this work rolling. And all it is we work to provide equitable curriculum to our students. We have cultural workshops. We take them to field trips in and out of the Valley. They do community service, and we engage in lots of work to prove to our students that who they are matters and that their actions are important. So I want to go ahead and play for you a little slideshow of my students and the success that we've done, but I'll also comment on some of the challenges and resistance that we have faced doing this work on our campus. All right, so as you can see, our campus club is very filled with many students who are really engaged in the work that we do. We started with only 25 students my first year. We moved forward with 136 students the next year, and now we're at a 212 student enrollment. Now, with that being said, this functions due to our collaboration with the community. We are partnered with Parent Voices Now, which does an excellent job at transporting our students to the state capitol, where students get to advocate for issues affecting themselves and their families. So in 2019, they went to the steps of the Capitol, they marched with their protest signs, and in the afternoon, they were able to walk into the offices of our representatives and articulate the issues that were affecting them and offering solutions, which is very empowering for students in 7th and 8th grade. Our students also developed their own Chicano Latino library, where if they read a certain amount of books at the end of the year, they're able to earn a free ticket to a Major League Baseball game. We are partnered with Univision, and my students work as student reporters, where they use their bilingual skills to interview the community, to interview parents and students at events such as La Feria de la Educación at Fresno State. We also have been adopted by the Chicano Alumni Club to offer a pathway for our students to attend classes, even as middle schoolers, to get to see what college is all about, so that our students can start to envision themselves there. We give back to the community with the Fresno Center. Every month we work with the community food banks to distribute food to families in need. We do weekly cultural workshops. We do field trips to the Mexican Art Museum in San Francisco, to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, as well as taking them to lots of college events such as Chicano Latino conferences, our Latina conferences that our students can go to. We also had a very ambitious endeavor this past year after I took one of my students to Sacramento. And as a 7th grader, he said, "Why does nobody here look like me? I feel like I can't be any of these people because they don't look like me." And so we decided to make a plan to go to Washington, D.C., where our beautiful brown kids can go and envision themselves as agents of change. It was cut short. We are on pause right now due to the pandemic, but from September to February, with community support, we were able to raise over $30,000 for our students. We were also one of the first clubs within the district to host a Latinx award ceremony at the middle school level, where 250 of our own students received awards for academic excellence. Now, although all those things are super awesome and our students are so engaged and it's amazing to see, there are many challenges that come with doing work like this, especially in the Valley. As educators of color, doing this type of work, it's truly a culture of isolation. I know that I speak of we a lot in this presentation, but the truth is most of the time it's just me. It's hard to get support on campus. It's hard to get chaperones. It's hard for people to really, invest themselves in the vision of this program. There's also a lack of financial support. Since this is a club, our site only allots $50 a year. So with our 212 students, if you divide that by the budget, you get less of a 25-cent investment in our students, which goes to prove how much they believe our students are worth, which is an issue. There's also intentional challenges stemmed by racism on our campus. We have had a petition by educators there to get rid of our Chicano Power t-shirts on campus. We have had teachers who have told our students that they and their families deserve to be in cages if they were immigrants. And of course, contradicting narratives that are purchased by the district that do not represent our students and their history. So I'd like to show you a student testimonial. It was part of a sponsorship packet for our Washington, D.C. trip. And because, I really enjoyed it when I read it, or when I read it, and I started to cry, because it kind of shows you the process that we want our students to experience in ethnic studies courses. And first and foremost is feeling comfortable, feeling respected, which is the dignity that our students of color deserve. And then you see that our students are going to start to be faced with adversity. And he was actually a student in that classroom with the teacher who said that about them, that they deserve to be in cages. And as our students, especially 7th and 8th graders who are dealing with identity and self-esteem, when you're dealt these cards, right, whenever people are being racist towards you, do you internalize that and feel less about yourself? Or do you use it as a moment of empowerment? And because he had the foundation of this club for the past 2 years, you can see that at the bottom of this testimonial, he says, even despite what that teacher said about me, I'm worth more and I will achieve more. I want to show the world that a young brown boy from Fresno, California, can make it to the steps of the Capitol to serve as a reminder that we are here to stay and that we will make a difference. And that's just one of these awesome testimonials that was provided just to show how these students feel proud of who they are and the impact that it's having in their lives. Now, due to community collaboration, we have been a success. It's an awesome part of my life and a true passion. And due to community advocacy, due to student interest, due to our parent involvement, after 3 years of fighting, we're finally able to have an ethnic studies course on campus this coming year. But that doesn't come without its challenges. It is not going to be a full course at our site. They actually had to buy an elective to have this course, so it's only one class. Getting student materials is very challenging, but we're in this fight together. And for our students, we deserve to do this for them. They deserve more and they deserve to feel important. So thank you.
So, hello on behalf of myself and Fernando Francis. We entitled our presentation Ethnic Studies as Resistance and Liberation. My name is Lauren Beal, and I currently work at Edison High School in Fresno Unified School District, and you can find me on Twitter at Lauren Beal. A little bit about myself. I originally am from Los Angeles, California, and I grew up only learning about Black history and Black culture within my home and never within a school setting.
My name is Fernando Santillan, and I teach Chicano Studies at Edison High School at Fresno Unified School District, and you can find me at Santillan Teach on Twitter. A little bit about me. I'm from Greenfield, California. I was able to get into Fresno State as a special admission student. I flunked out twice. It wasn't until I discovered Chicano Studies that I really found my footing as a student. And once I found that class, I graduated pretty quickly, and then I was able to move on to Sac State, where I was able to have just a little bit of synchronicity. I was there while Dr. MBA and Dr. Allender were doing the initial stuff with ethnic studies. So this was the model that was presented to me as I was going to school. They also really emphasized to me that teachers and teacher actions are political actions. And that's something I took with me as I began my teaching career. So the way we're gonna be doing our presentation is me and Lauren will be kind of doing this together. We both started teaching at Edison High School, our first year teaching in 2015. So our career paths have kind of been parallel. So we're gonna be talking about the beginning as we're searching. A little bit of background about Edison High School is situated in Fresno Unified School District, which is the third largest school district in the state of California. It is situated in west side of Fresno and southwest Fresno, which is a historically red line neighborhood in Fresno. It is richly diverse in culture and tradition, but it's been historically plagued by high rates of crime, unemployment, and poverty. A little bit of our school, it is a Title I school, and it is also a magnet school. So we do have 2,600 students, but about 50% of those students come from the west side, from the neighborhood where the school's at, and another 50% of the students come from everywhere else. These are the racial demographics of our school. If you notice, we have a 90.3% population of students of color.
And while Fernando has spoken about really the data behind our school, here are some of the pictures of not only what has happened within our neighborhoods, but also student agency, right? So Edison has a very rich tradition of student agency. We've had protests on our campus, protesting gun violence in our surrounding neighborhoods, protesting the changes that this president has tried to make toward DACA. We've also had incidences of teachers using racial slurs on our campus, right? So all of these things really make up our school site.
All right, so just a little bit about what is it that kind of pushed us into developing these ethnic studies classes on our site. These are some data regarding students of color, and as you can see, there are grades regarding some of these students. It's subpar, right? We have a lot of red and a lot of orange. Our school site and our school district does have a plan for this, a plan of action, and what their plan of action has been is this class here, Men's Alliance. Men's Alliance is the class where I had Jakari Fisher, who I spoke about earlier. And pretty much the way the class works is you put in all these at-risk students together and you give them this curriculum on so-called leadership that is pretty much the equivalent of Heroes and Holidays curriculum. And they also had, in addition to that, social emotional learning curriculum, which was completely disconnected from the culture of the students we saw in the classroom. In my 2 years, and I'm sorry, Lauren also taught the Women's Alliance class and I taught the Men's Alliance class. In the 2 years that I had that class, absolutely all the students were students of color. A little data about my first year teaching this class, I had 15 freshmen in there. Of those 15 freshmen, 14 of them were moved to alternative schools before the end of their sophomore year. So out of all those students that I had as freshmen 4 years ago, only one of them is set to graduate from Edison High School this year. So that created a lot of questions in our mind and really framed education for us. So it really made us think about our teaching practice and the need to expand instructional practices to better serve students from all academic, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds, right? And it made us think about our practices and really emphasizing the need for more equitable classroom practices, decentering whiteness in our curriculum, and culturally responsive teaching.
So a little bit about our searching going forward. After we both had this Alliance class, the need to connect with community resources and it not being enough for our students, we applied for a Hollyhock Fellowship at Stanford University, along with our colleague, Heather Miller. And pictured here is our coach for 2 years within the program that really pushed us as educators to think beyond what is being provided at our current school site. So when we had this fellowship, a part of this fellowship was to really look at a group-worthy question on how we can be in service to our students in our community. And our group question was, how can our school community better support our students of color with an education that is intentionally relevant, meaningful, and affirming of their identities? And the result of that was the implementation of ethnic studies. The first level of ethnic studies was really incumbent upon myself and Fernando, as well as Heather Miller, who established gender studies, is the teacher has to identify the course and based on the student's need for the upcoming year. So we had to look at what is the impact for our students? How do we drive data, right? Because we needed to validate why ethnic studies was an important class for our students to take. And we used the data from the Stanford study, which another panelist explained earlier. And it's also budget driven, right? Because it's not a requirement as a graduation course yet. It's up to your site and district to determine if they have the money to support ethnic studies.
So we were able to get the courses approved. So on our school site, we have African American Studies taught by Lauren, Chicano Studies taught by me, and we have Women's Studies taught by Heather Miller.
So what our class looks like, similar to our presentation earlier, this is my first class of African American Studies. I've been teaching it for 2 years. Click.
Sorry.
Some of the work we've done in that class, this is one of the work I'm most proud about, is a month-long.
We have 4 minutes, sorry.
4 minutes? Okay. Is a presentation on mass incarceration and really getting to the experience of Black Americans in this country. as well as the oral history projects we've done on portraits of the Black male experience.
This is my class, Chicano Studies. I was able to have 2 sections. I can't go over all the work that we did, but here's something that we did. We had a lot of student questions about racial inequalities found within society. So what I decided to do is teach them about critical race theory and have them use critical race theory to really analyze those questions. They created a series of presentations, and then I tasked the students in groups with telling me where they saw connections across these racial inequalities. Many of the students came back with cycles, etc., and then we had a whole discussion about systemic racism. This was something that was kind of referred back to like throughout the school year as we proceeded. And this is something else I wanted to show you guys. I know we're talking about the Third World Liberation Front. We start our courses, both the African American Studies course and the Chicano Studies course, with an emphasis on the history of ethnic studies. This is an assignment the students completed, and the task was to create a movie poster for the history of ethnic studies from San Francisco State all the way up through Precious Knowledge and Tucson University. Tucson School District. This is a little testimonial by a student that both of us share. The main thing I like about African American studies is that you get to get a better understanding of their history. Not only that, but since I'm taking United States history and also Chicanx studies, everything clicks together, but also pushes my understanding of what is presented in my history class.
We're going to actually skip forward to the end of our presentation just due to time, where we are talking about our model K-12 collaborations at our school sites and what are our challenges across all of our school sites within Fresno Unified.
I already briefly covered some of these challenges, but just to reiterate, there's a strong opposition to bringing teachers together, so it forces us into a culture of isolation. There's lots of staff opposition and content knowledge and access to curriculum. Although I have my experience as a Latina woman, I am not an expert in these fields, and we need to have teachers that are trained and knowledgeable to be able to share this with our students. And another challenge, of course, is the lack of, I cannot see the bottom, Lauren, so.
Collaboration.
The lack of collaboration, which I just mentioned.
And for myself, and it's going to be echoed with all of us, is content knowledge and access, right? That it's not enough to have a social science degree to teach ethnic studies. Also, I'm going to speak to a challenge of systematic support. Our previous VPs have been very helpful in observing our classrooms, et cetera. But as you have new influx of vice principals or principals, they may not even understand what ethnic studies really is, right? So the lack of intentional systematic support is really choosing the side of not caring about ethnic studies as a class, and really provides an oppression to our students that we're speaking of.
I think that was good. Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what is it that we need as educators out in the field teaching ethnic studies.
This will be our last one because we're at time. Thank you.
So within our classroom, site, and district, there are a lot of things that we need to explore as educators, right? In our classrooms, we have not had informal or formal observation and feedback materials. In our sites, there's collaborative planning time and the lack of, right? Amy spoke to financial support and the lack of at her school site. And lastly, Fernando, district.
At the district level, there is a definite need for collaborative planning time across the whole school district. As many of you guys mentioned before, that a lot of this ethnic studies requires the collaboration. And if we're not giving the collaboration time across the school district, then we'll never be able to really develop our curriculum, right? Another aspect is, as Amy is adopting her middle school ethnic studies class, and there's various across the high school level, when are we going to have time to do some vertical articulation? Additionally, as we know, like this is a huge endeavor. We need some professional development at the district level. And man, it's so amazing, these university collaborations are other places that we need here. And firstly, we need our school district to publicly support ethnic studies in order to get any of this stuff done in our school district. Last thing.
So the last slide, as Teresa just said, is survival is not enough as ethnic studies educators, right? we're doing great work at all of our school sites and awesome work, but survival is not enough. As ethnic studies educators, we need to demand collaboration, financial support, emotional support, and educational support in our classrooms, school sites, within our district, and our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Probably the hardest thing I've had to do is cut out these presentations because they are absolutely amazing. And I want you to imagine what it would be if we were able to articulate and have a pathway that included everything from last week to this week to next week. We have 4 questions that we've been trying to answer all the questions as we went through. Instead of answering the questions, I'm going to pose them to the panelists and anyone can answer. We just have a few minutes for these answers. The first one from Arnett Duncan is a question about inequity cuts across a very wide swath of society. And she wants to know what's the breadth of institutional equities. This term is a part of the purpose of ethnic studies. Ooh, that's a long question. But anyone can chime in and try to answer it in about a minute. Anyone? Well, I guess, okay, so I'll start a little and then maybe my colleagues could chime in. In terms of educational inequities within ethnic studies, we often talk about, well, one, the struggle for ethnic studies, but in that, trying to lend a voice and to the issues that our students are facing on a very day-to-day level, you know, issues of incarceration or issues of poverty, issues, even what Allison talked about in terms of what our students experience with just everyday racism and the increasing racism directed at Asian American studies. So your question is a huge question. I invite you to kind of look at the model curriculum itself so that you can see some of the institutional inequities that ethnic studies does try to cover. But I think the most important thing is that it isn't just raising the issues as a matter of knowledge. One of the most important parts of ethnic studies, which I think all of our presenters today demonstrated, is the need to create agency in our students so that they begin to address these inequities through social action and through movement building. Does anybody else want to answer or contribute to that answer?
Teresa, I can add just real quickly, and then I know Allison wants to say something as well, but I think just to build, I mean, you're correct. I mean, that was a huge answer, so I had to just like take a minute to stop and think about it. But everything you stated, and I think also in part of that with the analysis and in preparing teachers, right? It's taking it out of just an individualistic frame as well. Although important to understand our story, name our realities and our existence, there has to always be a critical analysis to the macro lens and societal structures that exist, because that is what is often used to try to counter the work that we are trying to do in ethnic studies and even prepare critical teacher activists, is to individualize the story in order to normalize and to not only normalize, but as well give to accept, for example, the inequities that exist. So, well, people are poor because they choose to be poor. I mean, that's a very general example, right? But just trying to use that to rationalize the inequities because there's not that larger analysis. And when you have those two combined, the macro and the micro, then we're able to simultaneously move our students and our teachers towards that transformation.
Thank you, Allison, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I read the question a little differently. I read it like, what are the inequitable cuts that may or may not happen? And so I want to kind of talk about the current moment that we're in education, and we all need to be alerted to this. but some of our leaders are thinking about what to cut in education right now with regards to the pandemic. And so I think it's really important that we look back in history, and ethnic studies is always on the chopping block. So they've already started talking about getting rid of PE, because how are students going to do PE during the pandemic? They're already talking about getting rid of art. I think we need to also be aware that in ethnic studies, if ethnic studies is not seen as an essential course, that we will be on the chopping block, and we need to be able to stand up and fight for that when it comes to these inequitable cuts that are about to come down in education. So it's kind of more like a warning, like we've been fighting for years and we need to be ready to fight again. Ethnic studies, we are always fighting for ethnic studies. And so that's just a little moment of warning.
Thank you. So our next question is, I think for you, Armando, it's a question about, are the ethnic studies courses open to high school students at any grade level, or do they need to be 11th and 12th graders?
Mute. No, the classes are designed for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Much earlier, you need a different curriculum. And these are all classes that are college level curriculum. These are classes that are offered at the university, and they're not dumbed down, but rather they're presented to the students in the context to provide them the connection with the history, the culture, and the contributions of these 4 major ethnic groups in the United States. And that's the only ethnic studies that we have had in the last 50-something years. There's some encroachment happening now that everybody wants to say, I'm also ethnic studies. And the bottom line is that we're talking about a struggle for 50 years just to open the doors. And at this point, quite frankly, I think that the students at the high school level, we have had 10th graders that have done very well in these classes. Not only are they interested, they're very motivated by the college credit. And I think that that's maybe a difference from district to district or different parts of the state. But undoubtedly, the work that's being done in San Francisco, in Sacramento, in Fresno, you would need to just research how much interest would there be for a college credit class on Saturday from some of your high schools. And I can assure you, we had in this part of the documentary 750 students that signed up for the first fall semester that we had at Long Beach Unified. So because of the demographics, undoubtedly there's interest, and the net result is very, very positive.
Thank you. Melissa Moreno asked if at Edison High School there was any use of LCAP funding. And maybe Guillermo, you could talk about that too, because I know yours is district level. So for our district level folks, were there any use of LCAP funding for your work?
No. You got it, Bill?
Oh, so at Edison High School, like Freya just said, no. There's LCAP funding just even struggling to support our clubs on campus, like BSU or MECHA. So there's no direct funding through LCAP for ethnic studies.
Right.
For San Diego Unified, yes, we did have some of the LCAP money, but unfortunately it was directed by the district. So, and they spent it in different areas, so it kind of got lost.
I'm sorry, at Sacramento Unified, we did get LCAP funding.
Right. The other questions are pretty broad, and I'm looking at the time. We actually have about 4 minutes before we move into our next sessions. So for the lack of time, I'm gonna tell the questionnaires that we will respond to your questions, and some of your questions that it will be answered at a different time in another session. But I would encourage you to continue to stay on. And for example, Sarah, your question is actually the core of our next webinar next week, which is not only how do we sustain teachers of color, but how do we begin to develop teacher preparation programs focused on ethnic studies. So we'll show a few examples of that Glenn, your question is absolutely right on. It's a question that we discussed last week, and I think there was very close to unanimity from those folks who were submitting their evaluations. And I would ask that you also join us next week as we begin to forge a way for policy issues, and that's the issue that you raised about how ethnic studies is lumped in with social science, and districts aren't supportive of ethnic studies courses. That's one of the reasons why we're doing these webinars, is because we want to move an advocacy agenda that addresses that issue so that that does not happen. And I think I'm looking at the time. We have 3 minutes. One parting comment from any of our presenters. I invite you to stay on at 6 o'clock when we get into community-based work on ethnic studies. I plead with you to fill out the evaluation forms, because from your forms come ideas for future webinars and for what we're going to be discussing in our open forum next week on what does it take to move ethnic studies teacher preparation forward. I want to say a big thank you to our presenters, and sorry for having to stop you throughout the way. Your presentations were out of this world. And so thank you. And we will see you all in about 1 to 2 minutes at our next forum. Thank you.
All right, bye everybody.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for moderating.
Thank you for being here. If there's any questions you all want to answer, you can. There's one for Fernando and Lauren.
Thanks everybody. Gracias, Teresa, Patricia, for monitoring.
We'll see you at 6.
See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Dr. Montaño, are you referring to, oh, I see it. Okay.
How would you adapt these lessons for elementary?
Teresa, I don't know if you saw my comment in the chat, but I just want to congratulate Jefferson Elementary. They just passed a policy to get wall-to-wall ethnic studies in all their middle schools and elementary schools.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, the Jefferson Elementary School District in Daly City here in California passed a policy to develop ethnic studies in all of their middle schools and elementary schools.
It'd be great to see that so that we can present it so that other districts could replicate it. So
hey, fabulous. I'll have them share that, the policy, the resolution. That's really exciting news.
Yeah,
so if anybody wants, they can all reach out to me. I'm working directly with them.
That is wonderful. Okay, so our next panelists, are you almost ready?
I'm here, but it won't let me start video. I was just trying to do a video check.
She'll let you in when it's, and then I see my two sisters, Cecily and Erica, are on. Becca, that's everybody, right? Oh, Suzanne. I saw, there she is. Hi, Suzanne. I've heard really good things about you from my friend, Stevie Reese. I'm so glad you joined us.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we should start. All right. Thank you to my presenters for being here today. The second webinar is exemplifying the battle for ethnic studies. And one of the most important points within ethnic studies is the longstanding history of struggle and resistance that includes community organizations and bringing in the voice of community and our day-to-day struggles against racism into the institutions of public higher education. As California begins to move towards ethnic studies requirements, We need to make sure that what we present as ethnic studies in our colleges and our institutions are expressing the marginalization and oppression of our people and people of color and Native people in California, so that we recognize that ethnic studies is not only taught within classrooms, but that ethnic studies includes the voice of and struggles of our communities. So our presenters this afternoon, or this evening, sorry, I'm off time, will be addressing models of bringing in issues from environmental justice to Black Lives Matter into the classroom as a reminder that those of us who teach ethnic studies must make certain to teach the totality and the wholeness of ethnic studies. Our first presenter is Suzanne Pierre, who's the senior environmental educator at the Exploratorium Teacher Institute in San Francisco. She's an environmental scientist and educator at the Exploratorium. She is dedicated to making high quality science education accessible to classroom teachers and the public. She co-founded the first student-led effort to recruit underrepresented students to science graduate programs at Ivy League institutions. Our second presenter is Lupe Carrasco Cardona with the Association of Raza Educators. You heard that repeated a number of times in our previous session. Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Coalition, and Unión del Barrio. Lupe is an advocate for implementing ethnic studies as a high school graduation requirement and a terrific curriculum developer. Our third presenter is Tolteca. Most of us know him as Tolteca, a warrior and a lead liaison and director for the Save Ethnic Studies Coalition. He's an organizer and an artist. A member, was co-chaired with Allison, the California AB 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Advisory Committee, is a member of the Instructional Leadership Corps with CTA, and has been recognized for his exemplary service by the state legislature. Our last presenters are two warrior sisters, Erica Jones, kindergarten teacher, and a member of the CTA Board of Directors, United Teachers Los Angeles. She is serving her second 3-year term on the board and works actively in promoting issues of social and racial justice everywhere she goes. And I'm pleased that she's been able to join us. And our last presenter presenting with Erica, my sister in struggle, the new president of United Teachers Los Angeles, the first woman of color to ever be the president of that union, my former union. She's the chair of the CTA Civil Rights Committee, chair of the NEA Black Caucus, a member of Black Lives Matter, and she actively engages in community struggles everywhere she goes. And so I'm pleased that they were able to join us, and I will now turn the floor over to
Thank you so much. Yeah, wow. It's really exciting to be with such an awesome group of panelists, and also for everyone who's showing up and staying on the call at 6 p.m. So yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, so as I was introduced, my name is Suzanne. You can call me Sue, and I am the environmental scientist for the Exploratorium. And so probably some of you know, and maybe some others don't, the Exploratorium is a science museum based in San Francisco, which does science education through informal means, through exhibits, but we also use the Exploratorium as a home for teacher education and professional development in the Teacher Institute. I was just hired there as their environmental scientist about 2 months ago, so just before we went into shelter in place. So it's been interesting. But I think one of the reasons that I'm here is that apart from my relationship with the Exploratorium, I'm also deeply passionate just individually about the ways that we can infuse science education and scientific research practice with ethnic studies. And one panelist earlier in the previous webinar mentioned that areas of study, both in secondary and higher education, like ethnic studies, are always on the chopping block when we come to these times of scarcity. So I think about the ways that we can infuse ethnic studies into questions of scientific veracity. So who gets to tell stories of what is true? And as I am an environmental scientist, I think about the ways that our culture and our historical experiences directly connect with the ways that we research the environment, changes that are happening in the environment, and then the people who are affected by those changes. So I won't speak for my entire 15 minutes. I actually want to just do a little introduction to some of the work that I'm thinking about institutionalizing in the Exploratorium through our professional development programs. But I also want to cede a lot of my time to questions in the Q&A section if folks have them, because I think that the dialogue between these two communities, the informal science education community and the broader ethnic studies community, doesn't happen enough. And so I want to provide a bit of a bridge to actually make that easier and offer myself as kind of that connection for these two communities. So as I mentioned, we talk a lot about how we can make our classrooms more equitable and how we can help teachers to think about their students' identities when they're teaching all sorts of science topics. And as we know, a lot of us on this call are aware that a lot of what we understand about traditional Western science is largely informed by indigenous discoveries, and we are trying to figure out the kind of ideal ways to work in and make kind of seamless the relationship between traditional science that we teach through the NGSS standards, so the kind of national standards for science, with traditional ecological knowledge, particularly with regard to understanding environmental change. So how can we directly connect these two science knowledge bases so that ethnic studies is seen as indispensable from the traditional STEM fields? So that's a lot of what I'm thinking about right now. I think this has come up a lot in this call, but I'll just add that as existing inequities are magnified during COVID-19, especially with regard to education and who's able to access resources and how they're able to connect with their educators, I'm thinking a lot about how we can help students who are doing remote environmental education to feel more connected not only to their teachers and their peers, but to the material via infusion of kind of cultural and historical basis for our examples when we teach environmental issues. So an example of that would be cultural astronomy. We are often kind of going back to this idea of looking up instead of looking down at our phones. And so when we think about teaching astronomy and understanding space, we want to infuse the ways in which indigenous communities from Central America to the Pacific Islands have already developed those technologies of understanding the skies. So those are just a couple of examples. But again, I don't want to use all of my time to give you all of the different past or future goals for the Exploratorium. I actually would like this community to help me guide those goals, because I recognize that I accepted this particular position, which is a huge privilege, in order to be, like I said, a bit of a conduit between these two areas of education that don't speak to one another enough. So I just want to, let's look at the Q&A and see if I can take some questions, or I'll turn it over to our moderator to kind of guide the reading questions and offering some answers.
So there is one question already, Suzanne.
Okay.
So since you still have some time, I'll direct it to you. The question is, we need to connect science and ethnic studies to address environmental issues and climate change. How do you envision community science / citizen science being useful for ethnic studies?
So I love that question, and it's, to me, that's a huge part of what I want to see unfold from the Exploratorium. So as the museum partners with districts for education in science in general, but specifically environmental literacy, I think about ethnic studies, or part of ethnic studies, in my understanding, is exploring not only our identities, but also dynamics of power. And I want to understand the ways that science and who's able to feel like they participate in the process of generating new knowledge is a source of creation of power and so a source of empowerment. And I think about the ways that classrooms, so entire classrooms with leadership from educators, can serve as small laboratories that actually offer students the experiences that connect them directly both to the land, so the place in which they are or where they come from, but also to the practice of investigating that land. So actually using the tools that scientists use and feeling agency in the process of explaining and understanding the changes, environmental changes happening around them. And we are definitely thinking about specifics, and I would be happy to follow up about specific ideas about citizen science.
Okay, thank you. Our next, I'm trying to see if we have any more questions for you. There is a one piece of advice, Suzanne, that it looks like a great opportunity for incorporating parents like in the educational process and programs. Okay, and Emily, we will get you her bio. The last question, and then we'll move on. You still have a little bit of time. Can you talk a little bit about your project, Critical Ecology Lab? That's for you, Suzanne.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much, Stevie, for asking that question. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I am an environmental scientist for the Exploratorium, but I'm also an independent scholar. I'm affiliated with UC Berkeley for environmental research, but I'm also very sort of disinterested in kind of reifying the academic and public dichotomy that I think everybody knows exists in science. And I think that is part of the process of incorporating ethnic studies into STEM education. So the Critical Ecology Lab is a nonprofit organization that I'm starting, working with Stevie and others to develop, which is trying to ask the question of how do we change the actual methodologies of environmental research to reflect the ethos of cultural awareness, respect for indigeneity, and work on anti-racist practice. And so how do we actually change the way that we do environmental research in order to build those ideas in and build those practices in to create a more just world? And so I don't want to waste more time and get into others, but I'd be happy to talk about the Critical Ecology Lab with anyone who's interested.
Thank you. And our next presenter is Lupe Carrasco Cardona. Lupe, you are on.
Hello, everyone. So I have a lot, but I'll try to make it very quick. And, you know, I'm really good at talking a lot, so I'm going to try not to do that. But I'm also really good at talking fast. So I'm going to use that skill that I have as well to make sure I get through and not get scolded by Comadre Teresa Montaño. So as Teresa said, I am Lupe Carrasco Cardona, and I come to you from Tongva land, so right here in East Los Angeles. And I saw folks kind of throwing their social media handles, so I went ahead and added mine really quickly. So at Lupe Y Cardona is how you can find me on most social media, the ones I actually use. So today I'm going to be presenting on the Association of Raza Educators, and essentially the reason why I'm presenting specifically on that is because it's an example of a community-based grassroots organization that is not affiliated with any institution. So we're not like, we're accountable to one another and to the community, but we're not accountable to like a school district or the state of California or anything like that. And so these, this is actually the general meeting, the last general meeting that we were able to have that was in person. Since then, we've been meeting, as everyone else has, with Zoom. And so you can see some of the awesome members and some of our baby members as well. So a lot of this is a little bit historical. It's like how the Association of Raza Educators came to be. But it's also really important to understand that because there are many other groups of people who may not be members of these types of organizations that have experienced similar things that could find a sort of a model that they could replicate in their own areas, their own regions. And also a lot of the things that historically have happened that have motivated ARE to move forward are very similar to some of the things that we're finding now, as many of the presenters in this webinar and the webinar before we're speaking to, is with COVID-19, it has shown what we, all of us right here that are panelists and many of the attendees already knew, and that is that we're in this like completely unjust society. We're in a system that does not work for all people evenly with equity, and we know that it's inhumane. We know that it's life or death. And now with COVID-19, we can see it by the hundreds of thousands, right? Like we can see right now how it's impacting certain groups over others. So ARE was first, so this is some of the mission statement of ARE. I'm gonna just read it really quickly. ARE was established to uphold the rights and liberties of the Raza community. Education is essential to the preservation of civil and human rights. It provides the foundation for all political and economic progress, and it must be a basic right of all people. Making this right a reality is the fundamental objective of ARE. And so when we think of education, we are talking about like inside education, so inside the institutions, but we're also talking about equitable education outside, in the outside spaces as well. So we are organized under our 5 basic principles and objectives. And so we always start with this, right? When we begin our meetings, when we begin to think about work that we're gonna get engaged in any campaigns, or even when other folks are interested in becoming either new members, or if they're interested in starting their own chapters, we always ensure that they are in line with these objectives and principles. And one is to promote critical pedagogy as the principal means of addressing the question of how to teach our children. We are about the struggle for democratic education, where parents and community have the same rights as teachers, counselors, and administrators in the education of their children. We promote community activism among teachers. In ethnic studies, it goes really in line with ethnic studies, right? Because we're not just about teaching, heroes and holidays. We're really more about understanding the systems that have caused these oppressions, and learning ways about how we can push back and we can have agency and liberate ourselves from those systems and create new systems, right? So we're really about promoting activism among teachers and also nurturing activism among our students and our fellow activists, right? And then lastly, the struggle to reclaim spaces in the institutions, schools, for progressive education and to develop politically active teachers. So the vision of the founders of ARE, in webinar 3, Guillermo Gomez spoke to how he is a member of Unión del Barrio, and he's also a member of the Association of Raza Educators Los Angeles, and he was talking about how that was where he sort of was ignited, like his political consciousness was ignited. And so in San Diego is where the original Association of Raza Educators was founded, in Barrio Logan, which is where Chicano Park is, where it resides. It's also currently very heavily under attack with gentrification. And so the core founders of ARE understood the strategic relationship of teachers to the struggle for Raza liberation. So education with liberation, right? I think it was Allison earlier that spoke about how ethnic studies is like, it's not just an academic discipline, it's like your whole life, it's life, period. So the founders of ARE envisioned the creation of a mass movement of teachers similar to mass movement. So we're already existing in Latin America, and educators moving on the front lines of the struggle of human rights and for self-determination of oppressed nations. So originally consisting of only 4 educators in Barrio Logan, ARE has grown into the largest teacher activist group in California, with chapters in San Diego, Sacramento, and Los Angeles. So if there are folks in here that are interested in creating a chapter, there is a process, but we do have a concilio, and I'm going to kind of speak to that in a little bit, that can help folks who are interested in forming other chapters. We currently have folks in Bakersfield that are interested in building their chapter. It kind of got slowed down with the whole COVID-19, because what we do is we provide a lot of support to ensure that those new chapters are strong. And so that kind of got a little bit disrupted, but now that we're all getting really proficient with these webinars and Zoom, maybe that's something that we can pick up again real soon. And so we're not going to go through this, but I left this on this slide just to show some of the former, what we do sometimes to sort of, we always do like a community builder when we begin our general meetings, very similar to what you would do in an ethnic studies classroom, where you build community with your students. So I just left this one on here as an example. And so I'm going to go through these slides very quickly, so because there's a lot. So in the history of ARE, ARE was not just working alone. There was also Unión del Barrio that was working to build educational movements throughout San Diego as well. And so we are not directly affiliated with Unión del Barrio, but we are sort of like a project that started out of teachers who were also members of Unión del Barrio. And so the reason, let me go ahead and, the reason why these teachers from Unión del Barrio formed the Association of Raza Educators is because, like many of us, the teachers were sort of separated throughout San Diego. And when Prop 187, that ballot initiative that was very similar to like SB 1070 in Arizona more recently, was like being, the movement towards this horrific prop was happening. There were teachers that were really like afraid for undocumented students, and they saw that the districts, the schools, other teachers weren't really doing enough to organize around protecting these students. And so, so that's when the Association of Raza Educators was first formed. So here's a little bit more information around that. So this is just some of the history of how the teachers using Prop 187 went to the schools and started forming the group. And then there was a period of stagnation in the Association of Raza Educators. And so the decline had to do with the fact that there was, high levels of activism led to the departure of members who were not politically committed to the struggle. There was a lack of political education among the ARE members that led them to not be prepared for the hardships of political activism, and also teachers working within the educational institutions were opposed to the political line and activism being proposed by ARE. And so these are historical, but they're also things to think about when forming these grassroots and community-based organizations, like in these current times, is that you have to ensure, like I said before, when we begin our general meetings, we begin with those basic guidelines and principles of what ARE stands for. We make sure that everyone that commits to that is committed to those guiding principles. And then you have to ensure that they're committed to your mission statement and your vision statement, because what happens is if they don't, they could actually come in and disrupt the movement, disrupt the all of the positive gains that you're making as an organization. And then furthermore, like what we as ARE do is, as you all know, there's so much work to be done, right? So sometimes you become like stressed out, right? You become like oversaturated with different work. And so this is something that I've actually spoken with Teresa about, is like, that's why we all have to be like comrades with one another. We all have to support one another's struggle, because the reality is there are not enough of us. Like, we need more of us doing this work to ensure, that these types of organizations survive, that we're doing this work to organize for our students, for our communities, for the teachers in this work. We really shouldn't be spending our energy, causing these types of frictions within and among one another. And so,
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna push forward. This is some of the history. I was really leaving this history in here to kind of show like how things like No Child Left Behind, right? Like those types of political political movements, like we were pushing back on some of those political movements. Those are some of the things that really inspired us to form these activist sort of groups, or our activist group, to push back on this. So I'm gonna push forward because otherwise I'm gonna run out of time. So, okay, lots of history. We've done a ton of stuff, as you can see here. Major achievements, okay. Work currently underway. Okay, so currently the Association of Raza Educators Los Angeles, because as I said, there's San Diego, and San Diego has a different sort of political climate situation, and then there's Sacramento. Sacramento Association of Raza Educators does a lot with the community, but they also do a lot because they're right next to the Capitol, and they're right next to the California Department of Education. So they do a lot of the political work around like ethnic studies and other educational you know, movements that are necessary that can be impacted legislatively there. San Diego does a lot of work with like immigration, a lot of work with you know, students that have like documentation issues and whatnot. Here in Los Angeles, we do a lot of that work as well, but we've also gotten really active with like the ethnic studies movement. And so one of the things that we did here is, let's see, 5 years ago, there were a lot of people asking for ethnic studies. They wanted ethnic studies training, but either they couldn't afford it because some of the other ethnic studies, you know, institutes and conferences were really expensive, or, you know, there were just these other issues that were preventing them. So what we decided to do was to just get the resources we had, which is one another, you know, teachers with, you know, like countless years of experience as, you know, ethnic studies educators, to come together, listen to what the people were asking for, and we started creating our own Praxis Institute. And we usually hold them in the summer. They're usually like 4 days. This year, we're gonna do a virtual one. It's only gonna be 2 days for a few hours, but we wanted to keep that consistency. And what we found was that even though we are grassroots, even though we're community-based, what we were finding is that people were sticking to all 4 days of our institutes, right? Even though we were not giving them college credit, even though we were not giving them salary points through like any district, they were feeling like they were getting a lot out of our institutes. And we, you know, we're really proud of that. And so that has led to people that have joined our institutes have said, you know what, we need to bring you to like our campus, our school. And we actually, as a grassroots org, have gotten already 2 contracts to provide professional development for Santa Maria Joint Union High School District, and also for Santa Barbara Unified School District. We're already, like I said, on our 5th annual Praxis Institute. And we've even done things like parent ethnic studies, which we call the College of the People. We've already had a couple of semesters where we've created bilingual bilingual ethnic studies curriculum for parents. It's been really beautiful to see. It's really introductory, but what we know is our students, you know, are really transformed by becoming students of ethnic studies. But what I have found with the parents is the parents have so much to say. They have so much to offer. And because of some of the parent ethnic studies that we've provided, we actually have a parent from this very class that's in this picture who went on to run for school board. And she's currently a school board member in a school district here in the Los Angeles area. So it's been really, really powerful. So essentially, what we have shown is that you don't have to be a part of an actual like institution. You can be grassroots, you can be community-based and do some really powerful work. And I know for me personally, as a, you know, one human being that's a member of this, that it has provided a space for me where I grow as a teacher, I grow as a person, and I also feel very protected. So anytime, you know, as somebody had said before, there's always been pushback. For 50 years, we've had pushback with ethnic studies, but I know that because I'm a member of this organization, that I always have people that are going to be there in support to ensure that, you know, I have a job, basically, that I'm going to be okay.
Thank you, Lupe.
Thank you.
And there is a question for you in the queue.
Okay.
Our next presenter is Tolteca Coyotín, and Tolteca, you are on.
All right, y'all, can you hear me okay? Cool. Glad to be here with all of you today. Sorry, I should have a little bit more light. I'm gonna try to move this over. A ver, but I'm gonna go to my slides, so hopefully this will work good. Slides up, can I go? Someone give me a verbal confirmation because I can't see myself there. Good, good. Okay, I'll go.
We can't see your slides.
Your slides are not on. Do you go to share screen?
Share content.
Boom. We good? We good?
Yes.
Yes.
Now you're on.
All right, y'all. Glad to be here with you today. Thank you to all the organizers for making it happen. I'm just going to dive right in. Teresa, if you could please give me my 5-minute heads up before it's up so I could get to the end if needed. Well, here we go. Save California Ethnic Studies, y'all. What is ethnic studies? How do we think, feel about ethnic studies holistically and in depth? This is the ethnic studies framework chapter we did from Rethinking Ethnic Studies, Rethinking Schools publication that I was fortunate to be able to co-edit and be a part of. This is not the space to go super in depth into the ethnic studies framework here, but one thing I want to focus on is the 4th macro scale, we call it, right? So you have the double helix, which Guillermo spoke about as well. So it's the humanization, holistic humanization on one strand, and critical consciousness, that criticality on the other strand, right? Then you have the 4 macro scales, and scale 4 is really that transformational resistance, that regeneration, that social and ecological justice, that community power, decolonization, right? Ethnic studies, that's what it connects to, that's what it's about, and so that's what we're focused on here today. Tlaxcalmati, gracias, gratitude to the Tatavi, Amtongva, Shumash, the indigenous First Nations, original inhabitants of this local land where I'm blessed to do my work. And of course, about relationship and solidarity building as well. And this particular slide was from a meeting that I'll get further into in a second. But yes, respect to Native peoples of the land, wherever you may be located as we connect today. So, I'm a teacher, LAUSD, UTLA, and helped open Social Justice Humanitas Academy, which was in San Fernando, right? North side of the Valle, Los Angeles. And opened it up, was there for 7 years. And this is something we're proud of there. It's called the Ethnic Studies Community Unity Champ. It integrates social justice unity chants from different places. We started off year 1 with the Inla Quech, which we learned from Tucson and Curtis Acosta's classroom there, right? Which was rooted in Luis Valdez, who, you know, based it on the Quiche Mayan Inla Quech, right? But we're like, let's keep on building it. So as students would go on college tours, connect to communities in different ways, it kept on evolving. So I'm about to share it. I hope it'll play. It's 8 different languages, including the language of sound. I want to give you a heads up to lower your speaker volume a bit if it's loud, because sometimes it just comes in really loud. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hopefully it'll work. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago daño a mí mismo, I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo y respeto yo, I love and respect myself. Yeah, so that's us representing there with it. Let me get back to this full screen. And yeah, so 8 different languages. If anybody wants a copy of it, let me know and we'll get it to you. And of course, adaptive to your own community. And yeah, the connection of social justice, unity chants from throughout the world into students representing. And of course, it's more than about just saying it. The toughest part is living it, right? So I don't have enough time here to get into all of it. I just wanted to express that community unity present within all of us and students. doing our best with it. Boom. East LA student walkouts, 1968, 5 LA high schools, right? One of their demands directly related to the need for ethnic studies in LAUSD. 50 years later, OGs that helped make that walkout happen are still with us in struggle today, right? Save California Ethnic Studies movement. And even back then, it wasn't just like at the institutional level there, it was community connection, right? Brown Berets, Educational Issues Coordinating Committee, United Mexican American Students, La Raza newspaper, and others connecting in a coalition at that, in that sense, to help make it happen, right? Even back then, it's still with us today. Check it out, 2 years later, we found this. I was so happy to, I was with Cecily at a UTLA meeting one day, and we met the UTLA president from 1970, and he's like, hey, you know, 1970, we were pushing ethnic studies, and y'all still are. And this is the language we found from a UTLA negotiation package, right, with LAUSD in 1970. Curriculum. The LA City School District shall provide a full range of curriculum materials, providing a program of instruction in Black and Mexican American culture and history in all inner city schools and at all grade levels. Literally, y'all, over 50 plus years of struggle for this, and even at the union level of pushing for it. We know what happened, right? You know, Reagan era, everything else squashed. So then we found ourselves in 2014, still pushing it, right? In the LA level, along with Ethnic Studies Now Coalition and all that were linked up with us then. So LA Times, we passed the resolution at the school board. LA Times announced it. LA unified to require ethnic studies for high school graduation, right? 2014. So it was supposed to be for the class of 2019, it would already be fully implemented. Now it has grown in LAUSD since then, but we are way behind schedule, right? As tends to happen with ethnic studies, unless we push and with community power, help make it happen and move it forward, right? So 2017, this is a picture at LAUSD when we mobilized again with students from across the district. They gathered at our Beaudry building in 2017 to demand the district begin picking up the pace of its ethnic studies graduation requirement implementation, right? Because it was dragging along at that point, and we're like, let's make this happen. And I want to give a shout out to ITAB program there, which stands for It Takes a Barrio. And it was a program that Teresa helped lead as well, Teresa Montaño along with Rosa Furumoto. And it was dope. It was connecting CSUN, right, college students with our high school classrooms, and them like kind of, you know, student teaching in there with us and helping with curriculum, and then we help them, but then also connect to the community in that ways to then they literally help get us the bus to be at this LAUSD at Beaudry to still push for ethnic studies as needed, right? So ethnic studies continue growing at the district level, and not to the level we really need it to, right? So 2019, our historic UTLA teacher strike brings about, as one of its clauses, resolutions, LAUSD UTLA Ethnic Studies Committee, right? Including, you know, to move forward as necessary because it's been taking too long, y'all, and we're not where we need to be yet. Because graduation requirement was the resolution of 2014, remember? So we're not at that yet. So out of that, we have the LAUSD UTLA Ethnic Studies Committee, initial meeting, February 2020, just a couple months right before COVID hit, right? And this was just like one of the slides that I had from that day. If you notice the whiteboard there, ethnic studies for all LAUSD students, right? We're still doing that. And I just brought this up, this slide here, and then with ethnic studies, community power on the side, because when we're in these rooms, we're working with districts, we're negotiating with districts, we're negotiating with the state, we're doing what we have to do. We have an obligation to represent our ethnic studies communities there, our communities of color, and do what needs to be done after 50 plus years of this struggle, when, as we know, part of the MO of institutions, unfortunately, is to dilute stuff, water stuff down, and take away the community power in the institutionalization. We cannot have that. So in all of your work that you all are doing out in your own communities, always remember what we're representing. I'd urge that, because if not, then institutions do what they do. And that's why this series is so important that Teresa and Patricia have helped organize. Thank you again, because literally we're already taking it to the next level, thinking of what needs to be done, right? And not waiting for anybody, but doing it ourselves. So really glad to be here with that. And that's some of the LAUSD level, y'all. To the California state level, connecting ethnic studies communities multiracially, intergenerationally, geographically connected throughout the state as never before, now and into this next era. Save California Ethnic Studies. Teresa, time check, please.
You have about 7 minutes.
Perfect. Let's go back, y'all. Again, Black Student Union, TWLF, Third World Liberation Front, San Francisco State and UC Berkeley, 1968-69. Community rooted there, right? Literally, students backed by community power from all the four groups of focus at that point, right? Including Asian American Political Alliance, the first to coin the term Asian American, right? Say, we're embracing that, we're fighting for our community struggle, right? Along with the Black Student Union and all the other groups at that point. 50 years later, still in struggle with us today, TWLF moving forward. As part of the State of California Ethnic Studies movement, which I'll dive a little bit deeper into, we've been blessed, again, to connect leading teachers throughout the state of ethnic studies today with TWLF OGs that helped found ethnic studies 50 plus years ago, to university students, to high school students that struggle with us, and all literally connected for a movement. So this is a picture from the bigger picture there is UC Berkeley Multicultural Center in October 8th. And so there's Harvey Dong, Nina Genera, Maria Ramirez, some TWLF OGs, along with Oakland area high school students and Youth Together, Mish from Youth Together there, along with Keith Feldman, who's the UC Berkeley Department of Ethnic Studies coordinator. And so we know sometimes there's the institutional divide, right, between the universities, institutions, and the communities. This cause has facilitated a process and space where universities, right, institutions, organizations, associations are in support of the struggle. So UC Berkeley there, after I think like 20 or 30 years of not really uniting to the community causes in the way that some may like, this was an opportunity to really connect. And they, for the first time in many years, came in support of this Save California Ethnic Studies Coalition movement. So that was beautiful. That day, if you look to the right, Ramona Tasco, San Francisco State TWLF OG and medical doctor today, Jean Kwan, former mayor of Oakland and TWLF OG from UC Berkeley. And Danny Glover, if y'all didn't know, he was a TWLF OG from San Francisco State. And that pic is from the San Francisco State TWLF Ethnic Studies 50th anniversary back in October. Thanks to Allison and everyone who helped put that up there. And yeah, amazing, y'all, connecting generations as never before. Why has this solidarity been so needed over the past 9 months with ethnic studies communities in California? Several levels of struggle, all interrelated. AB 1460, if y'all don't know, that's the CSU Ethnic Studies grad requirement, still in motion and movement, and we're needing support from it because, again, institutions doing what they do. There's a kind of a counter proposal in motion at the university level that's saying, oh, we'll do it now after we've been working for 50 plus years. And Teresa, Melina, everyone else shared on that. We'll be glad to get you more info on that. But yes, that's a current fight right now, right? AB 1460. Second there, sustaining and growing ethnic studies programs rather than allowing them to be cut on the chopping block, as Allison noted, right? Literally, we always have to be fighting for that. And third, California AB 2016 Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum at the California Department of Education. Teresa, how much time? I want to be respectful of time, but I'm about to dive in.
You have 5 minutes.
Perfect.
No, actually less than that. Sorry, you have 3 minutes.
All good. Ethnic studies under attack for 50 plus, really 500 plus years, y'all. And of course, the attacks continue. As some of you may remember, we're blessed. We're blessed that the IQC had about 130 applicants for the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Advisory Committee at the CDE, which was to move forward AB 2016, which was passed into law by Governor Brown in 2016, saying we encourage, not mandate, not require, encourage all California high schools to offer ethnic studies. A model curriculum goes along with it, right? So we were fortunate to be a part of that from February to April on very, very stringent, tight timelines. We asked for more. That's what we were given. And we did our best with what we had, right? And proud of what we had considering that time limit and all the circumstances. So everything's fine. We finish our work in April, right? We go on to May when the IQC, they meet, which is the Instructional Quality Commission in California, y'all. They meet, they make a few minor edits, approved for the next stage of public comments. We did have public comments at the earlier stage, which we integrated, but approved for the next stage of public comments in May, right? Everything's fine. You have your support coming in. Everything's fine until July, end of July, when boom, media blitz, media legislative blitz from outside communities of color hits, attacks, blowing up headlines all over the country, California ethnic studies. If you look at the bottom left corner, California wants to teach your kids that capitalism is racist, right? Wall Street Journal, it's the Hoover Institute that came out with that, right? Oh my goodness. Look at the top right corner, New York Post, Trump's favorite news source, left-wing activists trying to hijack kids out with ethnic studies, right? The classic attacks, and just so one-sided and so like, oh my goodness. I don't know if any of y'all
2 minutes, sorry.
who was connected at that time and remember it. It was deep, it was painful. It was like, here we go again, and directly attacking us. So we're like, what do we do? Are we done? Are they gonna, based on this press conference, is it gonna be something completely different? Diversity studies, multicultural, more superficial multicultural studies. Is that what it's about to be? Because the statement at this press conference was basically, we understand ethnic studies at the higher ed level. However, at the high school level, it could be more inclusive, European migration, etc. First of all, ethnic studies is community responsive to every student in the room and through an ethnic studies framework, right? And second of all, it's communities of color that have been working for this for 50 plus years. So how can it be decentered and taken away from us at the last second? We're like, are we done? Did we lose? Is this over? And thank you, Teresa, at that moment, because you're like, and along with others, we're like, no, chale. No effing way. We're in a fight and we're going to do this and we're going to do our best. And what this sessions right now today, these panels are a part of this fight continuing in different ways as well, right? LA Times announces us on August 21st, right? And I will say they're more fair newsroom rather than their highly biased neoliberal opinion room, which was against it. But their newsroom did their best to be more fair, right? Will changes to California ethnic studies curriculum weaken it? That's what some activists and educators say. They announced us. Boom, we had a press conference, top left corner, LA, by August 26th, right? David Goldberg, CTA Vice President, his daughter Mayan there, right? Jewish Guatemalan representing, Melina Abdullah, LA Black Lives Matter, Guadalupe, who just shared, thanks. Brian Zamora on the right there, UCLA Ethnic Studies Student Committee, co-founder there. Like literally we had university student committees popping up.
Wind it up a little, it's time.
Okay. So then bottom is San Diego, Guillermo's classroom with Shirley Weber visiting, holding the Rethinking Ethnic Studies book. On the right is San Francisco, Bay Area, all these press conferences within a month. Boom, we start getting all kinds of support. At first, everyone was scared to touch it. And then boom, now we're over 130 community-based organizations, institutions, units, associations in support. We built that after almost just losing. By the September 20th IQC meeting, look at this, we showed up over 50 deep, over 8,000 petition signed with over 8,000 support in less than 3 weeks. And by that time, the tone and tenor of everything had changed. State board, education members, IQC members, overall in appreciation of the advisory committee, support of the overall draft. Understanding most of the controversy has been over less than 1% of the curriculum, right? So we represented strong, and by then it changed. Everything changed. There y'all, some of y'all that morning there. And then, so how can we support? And if y'all haven't heard or known, please go to the change.org petition. We haven't really pushed it since that first initial month, but it's still important to sign if you haven't and spread it. Google Defend Ethnic Studies and sign it there and spread it around, please. Hashtag Save CA Ethnic Studies and hashtag In Defense of ES. We have that campaign. Organizational institutional unit support. I would love to know, we've had a whole bunch sign on, and if your teacher ed program sign on, that'd be great. We've had others throughout the state, and so thank you all for that. And let's unite the higher education ethnic studies and K-12 as never before. Much love, y'all. Tolteca@gmail.com if you want to connect for any reason, and I'm thankful and honored to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Erica and Cecily.
Yes, we are here. We are here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good to see you. Good to see everybody.
Yes.
So we're not going to put up a PowerPoint, and we're going to try to get through a quick discussion to continue. But one of the things that has really been centering our work right now in this moment is really making sure that we use the current crisis we're in to push for the abolition of systemic oppression within our public schools, as opposed to what normally happens during a crisis, where programs like ethnic studies and everything from art to music, that's what gets decimated during a crisis, where, and then privatizers swoop in and basically try to maintain status quo. So really looking at this time about like, how do we continue to push and organize virtually in this space? And also, of course, uplifting our students of color constantly. So a little bit about the work we've done. We co-chair the Racial Justice Task Force for UTLA, and we unapologetically push our union to actually get into racial justice work. It should be the work of our union, both at the citywide level, local level, but also at the state and national level. So we get into those spaces and we push that, you know, we should be doing this work. Out of our Racial Justice Task Force, we have created a basically professional development called Making Black Lives Matter in Schools, where we train fellow educators and really get into the conversation of what does it mean when you're actually going to center your work in making Black Lives Matter in your classroom? What does that mean when you center your work in your most marginalized? And how does that then change your teaching? So that's some of the work we've done. We've trained nationally, a couple of thousand teachers at this point, actually. And also pushing the teachers that we do train to go back and develop their own racial justice task force and then continue to take on this work. Because what we don't want is for you just to come to a presentation and then the work stops there, right? You feel good because you came to this presentation, but then you leave and you actually aren't, you know, jumping in and doing the work. So we really want to make sure that folks leave understanding that we all have to be in this work right now. And that all of our work should be centered around a racial and social justice lens. So with that, we've had a lot of fights that we've been going through. So I'm going to hand it over to Cecily, again, who just super proud that within our union, we now have a woman of color who will be leading us next up. So it's super exciting. Cecily, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. And, you know, this series really inspires me, and Dr. Teresa Montaño, I mean, like, that's the hero that we all aspire to be. She said some really great things, but really she has been doing this work as a labor of love. And so I want to give you thanks just straight up, because you've just done so much and you've inspired us. Lupe is just phenomenal. And then I get hyped every time I hear Tolteca, that I'm like, put me in the team, coach, I'm ready. So, I mean, when we say Black Lives Matter, I know y'all know that it doesn't discount any life, right? It has been a struggle, and I think we have to make sure that we are centering ourselves with a racial and social justice lens, that we are about that racial equity work as we move forward. So as I am taking this helm on in 2 months in a virtual environment, which is nothing I could have predicted, 6 months ago, I guess the real question is, how do we navigate in this time? How in this time of COVID will we actually assert ourselves that ethnic studies is important? That how we walk back into schools, because we will make a return, how does ethnic studies play into that return? How do we make sure that we are uplifting the values of every single person of color and marginalized folks who have been marginalized? Tolteca slide said for over 500 years. How do we walk into the school building saying, this is what we need? And I would assert that ethnic studies needs to be on the top of every single list as a part of turning the dime on the whole child, turning the dime on what it means in the struggle of ethnic studies, reopening schools against neoliberalism, against capitalism. All of these pieces are important as our babies come back into the school and that are not criminalized coming into the school. Ethnic studies is a very sure pathway for us to be able to lead us into the next iteration. Tolteca had slides where in our union, 1970, when our union was founded, there were packages that were specifically saying Black studies, Chicano studies. That was important. How did we lose our way moving? Now is the time to reclaim that. We've got to reclaim the spaces, and we've got to reclaim the time to actually say ethnic studies matters, that our students matter, and then how we come into the school building. I can't say that enough, because our babies are going to come in. Hell, our teachers, our educators are going to come in and need something different. They don't need standardized testing. They are going to need ethnic studies. They are going to need a different approach to the work so that we can break down the barriers of trauma. And this is the way to do it. So we've had to struggle in our own union to say, how are we living up to those type of principles to assert this, not only on the behalf of educators, but assert this for our students. So that's our chief message. That is our chief goal. And I think that we can do it. I know we can. You know, Tolteca showed that slide that gives me the chills every time, to show the kind of force that we could bring in January of 2019 with our strike. We were fighting for the hearts and minds and really for the soul of the city, and we won. And so with a reopening, with COVID, like, how do we do this work? And why it's important? Why is it important to lift up every single baby that feels marginalized in the classroom, feels like they don't have an outlet? This is it. And so I offer up to you that we have to be forward thinking. We have to have lead thinkers in the space to say, how do we say standardized testing is not the way, but ethnic studies is?
I think just connecting to what Cecily was saying, one of the things we talk about often is how our public school system actually was built on a foundation of white supremacy, right? And knowing that it was built there, we have to actually chip away and dismantle that. So in the work we do, and you'll see this a lot of times with community orgs where, you know, community orgs actually try to talk for you. We have been very adamant that we're not going to talk for you. We will be with you. But for example, right now, the student organizing that's happened in LA, it is time for educators to step aside and let the students lead that. And then support when needed. And I think one of the things we need to really look at in this movement, not only for supporting ethnic studies, but also in dismantling white supremacy, one of the things we need to look at in this movement is we all have our pieces in that, and we just have to keep pushing forward together. And how do we use this crisis right now to actually do crisis organizing? How do we do that? And how are we getting in these virtual spaces like we're in right now to have these discussions and, and to keep the momentum going? One of the things that I would have to say, there's conversations, up and down the state about what is school going to look like when we reopen. I can tell you one thing, if we're looking at like what standards should be prioritized or what subjects should be prioritized, ethnic studies is one of the only subjects that has a social emotional connection throughout it that makes me as a student know who I am. And that's the things that we're going to have to keep fighting for, because we cannot go through what happened in 08, right? And not only that, we've already seen the setbacks just in LA with the ethnic studies fight. We can't let this crisis put us back a whole other decade again. So how do we keep, crisis organizing, making sure we're showing up in these virtual spaces, making sure we're then going back and connecting with community organizations and connecting with stakeholders who can really help push this change statewide.
We have reached the end, and we have one statement, but actually Cecily and Erica, you kind of gave us another idea for our forum on maybe crisis organizing in ethnic studies, which we haven't really looked at. Stevie Reese says, thank you, Cecily. We need to center an uncompromising anti-racist agenda. Exactly. And if they whine that ethnic studies costs money, well, of course it does, because they have not invested. Good things cost money. So we draw to an end of this webinar series. I again want to thank my very busy, my very committed colleagues for coming to present with us. This is a labor of love for everybody. We want to invite all of the participants and attendees to our session next week. Next week, we will be examining existing pathways into teaching in ethnic studies. So we invite our colleagues from UCLA, CSUN, I know I'm going to forget somebody, Cal State Fullerton, and others who have begun to develop teacher pathways into the teaching profession for ethnic studies. At the next final session, which is the 6 o'clock session next week, is your turn. We want to hear from all of you and those who were with us throughout this series to begin to define what would an agenda for a seamless pathway into ethnic studies, an uncompromising pathway that aligns to the field of ethnic studies, its resistance, its resilience, its community connections, its voice of racialized communities of color, its intersectionality with other areas of oppression as well. So we invite you to come back. Thank you for being with us. I agree with Stevie. This was a grand slam panel, both sessions, and we're watching your opportunities for statewide advocacy, what you're putting in there. Please answer the poll. That is going to help us to define what our agenda topics will be for our final webinar. For our final webinar, we've gotten so much from you that we're probably going to continue this series. So again, if you have other examples, I love crisis organizing in ethnic studies or any other themes that you would like for us to address, please let us know. Thank you to Patricia Lopez and Gladys and the folks from Enseñamos de Fresno. Thank you to my union, the California Faculty Association, for supporting our work as well. And Patricia, that is it. I see no other questions. Oh, there's tons of questions in the questions and answers now. Those of you who are in here, you will be receiving links to the PowerPoints and the video.
Okay, I think we're going offline now.
Okay, great.
Thank you, everyone.